The story kicks off focusing on a mysterious dynamic between a beloved school idol and a supposedly ordinary guy who secretly has a lot more going for him than meets the eye. With summer break quickly approaching, the classroom buzzes with excited chatter about beach trips and pool days, while Haru checks in to see what his buddy has lined up for the holidays. His friend completely kills the vacation vibe by casually admitting he just plans on studying. Haru is absolutely horrified by this tragically boring answer, but his friend deadpans that he would never lie to his best buddy about something so serious. Refusing to accept this terrible waste of youth, Haru dramatically reminds Haruto that they are second years now and desperately need to take a breather to actually enjoy their fleeting high school days. Haru pitches the ultimate teenage dream of hitting up the beach or the pool with the girls from their class, his attention drifting toward a very specific group of girls chatting nearby. Haruto immediately shoots down these grand delusions, warning Haru that if he plans on inviting the ultra-popular Tojo, he is flying completely solo, leaving Haru feeling incredibly betrayed. The girl catching everyone's attention is Ayaka Tojo, the undeniable idol of the class who effortlessly brightens the room just by being there. She is basically flawless, boasting glowing flaxen hair and an ethereal presence that leaves the entire student body absolutely mesmerized. The story kicks off with a look at the school's absolute goddess, Tojo-san, a girl so breathtakingly gorgeous with model-like proportions and stunning looks that everyone treats her like an actual celebrity idol. Naturally, Tomoya wants a piece of the action and begs his buddy Haru to invite the popular girl out on his behalf. Haru immediately shuts down the lazy request, telling Tomoya to do his own dirty work and prepare for the inevitable rejection, which Tomoya finds incredibly offensive. Tomoya laughs it off and insists that Haru is the one who actually has a fighting chance here. His logic is simple, since Haru is the undisputed academic genius holding down the highest grades in their entire school year. Haru sighs at the ridiculous idea, while some nearby classmates point out that the school idol might not even be interested in guys at all, a rumor that leaves the other girls in absolute disbelief. Instead of being disappointed by the rumor, Tomoya gets a mischievous vibe and muses that a scenario like that wouldn't be half bad, either leaving Haru completely bewildered by his friend's weird taste. Haru decides to steer the conversation away from high school drama and mentions his plans for the upcoming break. When Tomoya asks if he is going traveling, Haru reveals he actually scored a short-term part-time job, making his friend wonder what kind of work he found. It turns out that Haru is going to be spending his school break working for a professional housekeeping service, showing off his new gig. After a busy day, Haru finally makes it back to his quiet residential neighborhood and calls out to let his family know he has arrived. Exhausted from the relentless heat, outside Haru is greeted by his sweet grandmother, who welcomes him back warmly as he steps through the door. Haru excitedly reports his successful grocery run, detailing the sweet bargains he snagged on cheap ground meat and onions at the crowded supermarket. Hearing about the budget-friendly ingredients, Haru happily suggests they make some delicious Hamburg steaks for dinner tonight. Haru declares that his grandmother makes the absolute best Hamburg steak. He promises to help her out in the kitchen right away, but decides he needs to take care of one crucial task first. Before doing anything else, Haru pays his respects at the family shrine, greeting his deceased parents and grandfather to let them know he is finally home. Haru reflects on his tragic upbringing, explaining how he lost both of his parents in a terrible car accident when he was very young. Luckily, his maternal grandparents took him in with his grandfather, enrolling him in a karate dojo to build up his mental and physical strength. Sadly, his grandfather passed away right before Haru started middle school, leaving just him and his grandmother to look after each other, which is exactly why he is taking on a part-time job this summer. Haru reassures his late family members that they have nothing to worry about, promising that he will still focus on his studies and keep visiting the karate dojo even with his busy new schedule. With his daily vow out of the way, he is ready to get to work. Haru attributes his impressive domestic capabilities to his grandmother, who thoroughly drilled housework and cooking into him over the years. Thanks to her strict upbringing, he has managed to acquire cooking and cleaning skills that are way above average. Sensing his momentary distraction, Haru's grandmother checks in to see if something is bothering him. He quickly brushes it off, claiming he is totally fine and just incredibly hyped up to eat dinner. After polishing off the meal, Haru lets out a deep sigh of pure bliss and satisfaction. Reeling from a glorious food, Koma Haru basks in the memory of his grandmother's legendary cooking. His peaceful evening is suddenly cut short, however, when his phone begins to buzz with an incoming call from Tomoya. Haru answers the call only for Tomoya to hit him with a surprisingly clingy greeting, casually admitting he just really felt like hearing his best friend's voice. Haru finds the sudden sentimentality incredibly creepy and threatens to hang up immediately. Tomoya panics and quickly shifts the focus to some juicy gossip about what went down right after they left school. Tomoya asks if Haru is familiar with Kaido Senpai, a popular third-year tennis club player who always has the girls talking. When Haru confirms he knows the guy, Tomoya reveals that this very same student called Tojo-san out for a chat. Tomoya explains that the third year took over the entire schoolyard broadcast to pull off an unbelievably dramatic confession. Right in front of a huge crowd, the guy presented her with a ring and popped the question, leaving Haru completely stunned by his sheer boldness. Tojo-san did not even blink, immediately cutting the poor guy down with a cold, direct rejection, which is exactly the kind of brutal shutdown Haru expected to hear. It turns out that dealing with desperate suitors is just a regular occurrence for Tojo-san. As the undisputed school idol, she is constantly being pursued by countless good-looking guys both on and off campus. Despite all the creative dating tactics and romantic strategies thrown her way, she has never given a single suitor a positive response. Haru actually starts to feel a bit sympathetic, noting how exhausting it must be for her to constantly deal with these advances. Tomoya jokingly challenges Haru, claiming he would get instantly rejected too if he tried naming him the successor to the tragic tennis star. Haru snaps back that joining those ranks is hardly a compliment and decides to finally hang up on his teasing friend. Ultimately, Haru convinces himself that Tojo-san is merely a fun topic of conversation among friends, assuming their paths will never actually cross in real life. That was his exact mindset at the start of the summer break, but his peaceful plans were about to change completely the moment he officially started his new housekeeping gig. Just 3 days into his vacation, Haru arrives at his very first official housekeeping assignment, totally stunned to learn that his very first client is apparently a high-profile celebrity. Gathering his courage, Haruto prepares to start his first shift, wondering what kind of wealthy high-class family could possibly live in such an incredibly massive mansion. He rings the doorbell and is quickly answered by a voice on the intercom, prompting him to introduce himself as the helper sent by the housekeeping agency. The client politely tells him to wait a moment while they unlock the door, and hearing a young woman's voice on the other end instantly cranks Haruto's anxiety levels up to 11. The front door finally begins to open, and Haruto braces himself to greet his first client face to face. Delivering a professional greeting, Haruto introduces himself as Atsuki and thanks the client for choosing their agency, before confirming he will be the one handling the chores for the day. As he finishes his introduction, his brain completely short-circuits when he realizes the person standing at the entrance is actually the school's ultimate idol, Tojo-san. Both of them stand frozen in absolute disbelief, completely unable to process how they ended up in this wildly awkward situation. Tojo-san eventually breaks the silence, recognizing him as her quiet classmate, Atsuki-kun, while Haruto can only stare back in mutual confusion. Haruto suddenly remembers his friend's warning about her dealing with constant unwanted male attention and realizes how bad this looks. Tojo-san quickly explains that she was actually expecting a female worker to show up, leading Haruto to apologize and point out that she must have accidentally skipped the option to request a female staff member when booking. Wanting to make sure she feels completely comfortable, Haruto immediately offers to step down and have the agency send a different housekeeper to take over the job. He warns her, however, that finding a replacement worker on such short notice might take quite a bit of time, and asks how she would prefer to handle the situation. To his surprise, Tojo-san declines the offer and says she is perfectly fine with him staying, telling him to go ahead with the scheduled service. Her easygoing response leaves Haruto completely caught off guard. Tojo-san just wants to confirm one crucial detail, asking him directly if he took this assignment because of her. Haruto quickly and desperately reassures her that it is a total coincidence and he had no idea she lived here. Satisfied with his honest answer, Tojo-san immediately relaxes and invites him inside. Still a bit nervous but incredibly relieved, Haruto accepts her invitation and politely says he is looking forward to working with her. Once the front door locks behind him, the sheer gravity of the situation finally sinks in, and Haruto finds himself totally stunned by the reality of where he is. As he looks around the interior, Haruto is absolutely blown away by the endless hallway, marveling at how incredibly massive her home actually is. He notes that this level of extreme luxury is exactly what you expect from a real mansion. Tojo-san then directs him toward the kitchen, and Haruto politely follows her lead. Haruto still cannot believe his very first gig is at Tojo-san's house, finding the whole day increasingly surreal. He cannot help but wonder if she is still secretly wary of a male classmate, being in her private space, questioning if he is truly the right person for this job. Tojo-san begins the tour by showing him the living room and explaining that the kitchen is located just past it. Haruto can barely contain his shock as he gets his first look at the incredibly stylish high-end living area and the spacious dining setup. He quickly calculates that her living room alone is easily 2 or 3 times the size of his entire house, leaving him completely awestruck by her family's wealth. His quiet daydreaming is suddenly cut short when Tojo-san calls out his name to get his attention, snapping him right back to reality. Realizing he needs to act professional, Haruto delivers a formal greeting and officially presents his business card. Tojo-san is highly impressed, finding it quite surprising that her classmate actually carries professional business cards. Haruto goes over the details of her booking, confirming that she requested the standard 3-hour service for kitchen cleaning and dinner prep, which Tojo-san confirms is correct. Tojo-san admits that it feels incredibly strange being addressed with such high-level, ultra-formal honorifics by someone from her own class. Haruto politely explains that she is an important client today, secretly believing that maintaining a strict professional boundary is the best way to keep things comfortable for her. Haruto announces that he is ready to begin his shift and asks if there are any specific guidelines or tasks she wants him to prioritize, prompting her to think for a moment. Hesitating slightly, Tojo-san nervously asks if he would mind checking out the kitchen before he does anything else. Haruto is immediately faced with a kitchen in absolute chaos, while a highly embarrassed Tojo-san sheepishly asks if it is really okay to have him clean up such a massive, embarrassing mess. Tojo-san awkwardly asks if he can really handle cleaning up the place, considering the absolute disaster zone it is currently in. Taking in the sheer chaos of the room, Haruto starts to realize that the flawless school idol might actually be incredibly clumsy. But he brushes past it and confidently promises to make everything spotless for her. Feeling a bit guilty, Tojo-san decides she should at least go tackle the living room herself. But Haruto quickly stops her, insisting that he can easily take care of that space as well. He smoothly reminds her that taking care of the chores is literally what he is being paid to do, leaving her pleasantly surprised by his solid dedication to his new job. Yielding to his professional attitude, Tojo-san caves and officially leaves the living room entirely in his capable hands, which he readily accepts. Before heading off to her own room, upstairs, she gives him clear directions on where to find her if he needs anything, points out the vacuum cleaner, and formally entrusts the entire house to him. Once she is finally out of sight, Haruto drops his composed professional front and takes a quiet moment to mentally process everything that just happened. The intense pressure of casually interacting with the most popular girl in school suddenly catches up to him, and he finds himself gulping down a wave of lingering anxiety. Letting out a massive sigh of relief after holding it together for so long, he starts wondering why a wealthy girl like her would even need to hire a random outside agency for housekeeping in the first place. Putting that mystery aside, he absolutely cannot help but mentally fanboy over the situation, admitting to himself that seeing the untouchable school goddess up close in her relaxed everyday clothes is a total blessing. Looking at her casual outfit, Haruto finds himself momentarily distracted, realizing that Tojo-san is surprisingly well endowed. He immediately shakes his head to clear those intrusive thoughts, reminding himself that she is his highly important first customer, and he needs to keep things strictly professional. Pumping his fist with intense determination, Haruto hypes himself up and shouts that he needs to put all distractions aside and focus entirely on doing his job. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, Ayaka lets out a quiet sigh, admitting to herself that she was incredibly surprised, since she never expected her classmate, Atsuki-kun, to be the one who showed up. She thinks about the bizarre coincidence, wondering if having a reliable classmate like Atsuki-kun around might actually turn out to be a perfect match for her needs. Staring off quietly, she realizes that her peaceful summer break is getting off to a completely unexpected and interesting start. The story flashes back to 3 days ago, showing a completely stressed-out Ayaka crying over the phone to her friend, Saki desperately whining that she cannot take the pressure anymore and absolutely refuses to go back to school. Lying face down on her bed, Ayaka vents about the absolute insanity of her senior publicly proposing to her with a ring over the school broadcast, while Saki listens on the speaker, offering her sincere sympathy while correcting the guy's actual name. On the phone, Ayaka comments on how popular that senior is, worrying that rejecting him will just make someone else resent her. Her friend points out that with summer vacation starting tomorrow, everyone will completely forget about the drama anyway. Saki reminds her that getting a boyfriend would be the easiest way to ward off all these unwanted suitors, though Ayaka insists there is simply no one around who fits the bill. Saki casually suggests that Atsuki from their class might actually be a perfect match, prompting Ayaka to recall him as the quiet guy who always scores at the very top of their grade. Saki points out that compared to the rest of the guys at school, Atsuki has a really calm and gentle vibe without being overly pushy. Ayaka listens thoughtfully, a little surprised by the unexpected recommendation. Saki playfully pushes the idea further, teasing that having a dependable boyfriend to protect her would finally give Ayaka some much-needed peace of mind. Ayaka playfully whines back, telling her friend to stop messing around and teasing her like this. Back in the present, Ayaka rests her head on her desk, completely stunned that Atsuki actually showed up at her house as the hired housekeeper. She reflects on how she impulsively decided to request him after Saki's teasing, never actually expecting him to accept the gig. Sitting quietly in her room, she silently wonders if going out of her way to hire her classmate was acting a bit too out of character for her. The narrative takes a quick pause to tease the mystery behind what exactly is going on inside the heart of the school's seemingly perfect beauty. Meanwhile, Haruto tries to mentally reset, deciding that even with the incredibly awkward circumstances, he still has a job to do. He heads straight for the kitchen and discovers an absolute disaster zone, including a pan filled with something completely burnt to a crisp. Rolling up his sleeves, he notes that the flawless school idol apparently has a surprisingly clumsy side and eagerly gets to work cleaning up the massive mess. After finally finishing the intense kitchen cleaning session, Haruto wipes his brow and decides to go report his progress to his client. Just as he prepares to leave the room, a strange thumping noise from nearby suddenly catches his attention. The quiet atmosphere is suddenly shattered when a little boy bursts through the front door, loudly announcing his arrival home and completely startling Haruto. The kid takes one look at the unfamiliar guy standing in their house, immediately assumes the absolute worst and bolts in the opposite direction, screaming about a burglar. Haruto desperately chases the boy down the hallway, begging him to wait and listen to reason, but the panicked kid just keeps running and screaming for his older sister to save them. The boy finally reaches Tojo-san, frantically warning her about the dangerous intruder, while she just looks down in total confusion, wondering why her little brother is causing such a massive ruckus. Tojo-san blankly tries to process the bizarre accusation of a thief breaking into their completely secure home. She quickly pieces the situation together and bursts into giggles as a very apologetic Haruto finally catches up, awkwardly explaining that her brother completely misunderstood his presence. Seeing his sister laughing casually instead of calling the police, leaves the little boy feeling completely bewildered. Tojo-san gently steps in to clear things up, explaining to her brother that Haruto is actually a professional housekeeper, hired to help out with all the cooking and cleaning around the mansion. The kid guiltily wonders if they had to hire professional help because he totally wrecked their kitchen earlier, but Tojo-san quickly reassures him that she had been planning to get some domestic support for a while now. She warmly praises her little brother for trying to cook a meal for her in the first place and playfully reminds him that he was supposed to be heading right back out to hang with his friends anyway. Tojo warmly welcomes her little brother back and asks about his trip to the park. Hearing the exchange, Haruto internally sighs with massive relief, realizing the young boy was the actual culprit behind the kitchen disaster, and silently apologizing to the school idol for ever assuming she was just a clumsy mess. Tojo introduces the little guy as her much younger brother Ryota, apologizing for the confusion since he is still in kindergarten and doesn't quite grasp the whole hired help situation yet. Haruto brushes off the apology, just thrilled the massive misunderstanding is finally cleared up, and offers a gentle apology to Ryota for startling him earlier. Wanting to start fresh and make a good impression, Haruto properly introduces himself to the kid, offering a friendly handshake to officially kick off their new acquaintance. Ryota politely bows his head and genuinely apologizes for calling Haruto a thief earlier. Haruto laughs it off, assuring the boy that his reaction made perfect sense given the circumstances, while secretly feeling incredibly impressed that a kid his age has the maturity to recognize his mistake and apologize completely unprompted. With the wholesome introductions and apologies officially out of the way, Haruto suddenly remembers why he is actually there and realizes it is time to get back to his paid duties. He turns his attention back to Tojo and announces that he has already finished cleaning the kitchen, asking her to do a quick inspection of his work. Tojo is caught completely off guard by his blazing speed, amazed that he managed to wrap up the messy job so fast. She steps over to the kitchen area and is instantly blown away, letting out a genuine gasp of awe as she takes in the completely spotless, sparkling countertops and perfectly organized living space. Haruto politely asks for her feedback, offering to touch up anything she isn't happy with, but Tojo quickly assures him the place looks absolutely flawless. She sincerely praises his incredible cleaning skills, prompting him to humbly admit that he specifically chose this line of work because he is so confident in his domestic abilities. Meanwhile, little Ryota is having the absolute time of his life, zooming around the living room, completely hyped about how every single surface in the house is suddenly glowing from being so intensely scrubbed. Haruto nervously watches the kid run around, internally sweating over the freshly settled dust getting kicked back up into the air. Luckily, Tojo immediately steps in and lightly scolds her brother, reminding him not to ruin all of Haruto's hard work, which gets a quick obedient agreement from the energetic little boy. Tojo-san admits she is incredibly relieved that Haruto showed up to help. With her parents away on a business trip, she explains that she has been stuck handling all the chores and wrangling her wildly energetic little brother entirely on her own. Hearing this, Haruto warmly praises her for being such a good older sister. Tojo-san acts a bit surprised by the sudden compliment, but Haruto insists that her dedication is completely obvious just from watching her handle things. Caught off guard by his total sincerity, Tojo-san blushes slightly and shyly thanks him for the kind words, showing a much softer side of herself. Right on cue, Ryota suddenly pops into the conversation, loudly chiming in to agree that his big sister is absolutely amazing. Haruto playfully agrees with the kid, but quickly turns the praise around, telling Ryota that he is also a fantastic little brother for actually listening to her and being so well behaved. Ryota gets super excited about the unexpected compliment and proudly brags to his sister about being a good boy, which she happily confirms. Watching the two of them interact, Haruto cannot help but smile, thinking about how genuinely nice and heartwarming these little family moments really are. Snapping back into professional mode, Haruto confirms that he needs to prepare 4 servings for dinner and asks for permission to check the fridge to see what kind of ingredients he has to work with. Taking inventory of the shelves, he mentally catalogs the basics like eggs, milk, and veggies, but gets really inspired when he spots a premium pack of mixed ground beef and pork, knowing exactly what kind of meal he can pull off. He asks to borrow some seasonings to bring his culinary idea to life, and is completely blown away by her kitchen setup, marveling at the incredibly diverse and perfectly organized spice collection she has on hand. Armed with top-tier ingredients, Haruto confidently pitches his signature dish, suggesting they have hamburger steak for dinner. The menu idea is an instant smash hit with Ryota, who lights up with joy and immediately starts begging his sister to agree to the meal. Tojo-san officially decides they will have hamburger steaks for dinner, which Haruto readily agrees to prepare, sending her little brother Ryota-kun into a state of absolute ecstatic celebration. Haruto gets to work in the kitchen and serves up a beautiful glistening hamburger steak platter that looks like something straight out of a 5-star restaurant. Both Tojo-san and Ryota-kun are completely awestruck by the presentation, letting out simultaneous gasps of excitement at how mouth-watering the meal looks. Tojo-san praises his incredible domestic skills, jokingly comparing his talent to top-tier housemaker abilities. While Haruto modestly insists his skills are pretty basic, she remains unconvinced, remarking that watching him cook was like watching a seasoned pro. He humbly replies that her high praise is a true honor, since her parents won't be home until later. Haruto hands her a detailed note on how to perfectly grill their remaining portions when they arrive, which Tojo-san gratefully accepts. Noting that the clock has officially struck 6, and his shift is over, Haruto announces it is time to conclude their contract for the day and prepares to head home. Tojo-san sincerely thanks him for all of his hard work, letting him know he was an absolute lifesaver. Haruto warmly replies that he was simply glad to be of service. As Haruto gets ready to leave, he notices Ryota-kun lingering nearby with a slightly sad expression, prompting him to kindly ask the little guy if something is wrong. Ryota-kun waves a sad farewell, begging his favorite new older brother figure to come visit again soon. Haruto happily promises to see him again, though he secretly assumes that because of the natural awkwardness of classmates working together, Tojo-san probably won't book him ever again. Tojo-san gently cuts in, letting him know she will walk him out to the front door to see him off. As he finishes packing up his things at the front door, Haruto formally thanks Tojo-san for using their agency's services, but quickly realizes he forgot to do one last important task. Slipping straight into salesman mode, Haruto hands her a promotional flyer and explains that the agency offers regular contracts that are way more affordable than booking single sessions, jokingly admitting he is obligated to pitch it to her before he leaves. Tojo-san breaks into a bright smile and laughs at his very formal pitch, teasingly telling him that he sounds exactly like a corporate salesperson. She points out how incredibly weird it is having a classmate speak to her so formally and asks if they can just talk casually. Haruto awkwardly replies that while he normally would, she is technically his client right now, meaning he has to maintain his professional boundaries. Tojo-san finds the whole strict client dynamic highly amusing, gently laughing off the awkwardness. Haruto quickly reminds her to hurry back inside before her hamburger steak gets cold, prompting her to realize he is totally right. With everything settled, she warmly thanks him for all his hard work today, making sure to use his actual name. Haruto bows respectfully and delivers his final professional farewell, stating that the agency looks forward to serving her again. Stepping out into the quiet evening neighborhood, Haruto lets out a massive sigh of exhaustion as the intense pressure of the day finally leaves his body. Stretching his arms out, he celebrates successfully surviving his very first housekeeping gig, despite all the wild twists. He takes a moment to reflect on the crazy reality that the school's flawless idol is actually a wealthy young lady living in a massive mansion. Realizing just how massive the gap between their social standings truly is, he concludes that she basically lives in an entirely different world, and mentally tells his buddy Tomoya to completely give up any hopes of ever dating her. Meanwhile, back at the luxurious mansion, Tojo-san and her little brother happily clap their hands together in gratitude and excitedly dig straight into the delicious home-cooked dinner Haruto prepared for them. Tojo-san takes her first bite and is absolutely blown away by the flavor, declaring the meal so incredibly delicious that it might just be the best thing she has ever eaten. She turns to her little brother for backup, but Ryota is already way too busy aggressively shoving the food into his mouth at lightning speed to actually answer her. Tojo-san quickly scolds him to chew his food properly before he chokes himself, prompting Ryota to protest that he cannot help it, because the meal is just way too good, a fact his sister completely agrees with while still urging him to slow down. Ryota eagerly asks if the awesome housekeeper guy is going to come back again soon. Tojo-san gently lets him down, explaining that their parents are finally returning home today, so they probably will not need to hire any more outside help for a while. As she takes another bite, Tojo-san thinks about how notoriously shy Ryota usually is around strangers, leading her to realize that Haruto must be a truly amazing guy to win her little brother over so effortlessly. The thought of this being their final interaction leaves her feeling surprisingly disappointed, as she wonders if this really is the end of his housekeeping service right up until a promotional flyer for setting up a regular service contract suddenly catches her eye. The very next evening, following the fantastic housekeeping service, Tojo-san arrives outside a cozy local cafe. She steps through the front doors of the quiet establishment and immediately starts scanning the room to find whoever she is supposed to be meeting tonight. A familiar voice calls out to Ayaka, easily capturing her attention. Her friend Saki cheerfully waves her over to a table, signaling for Ayaka to come and join her. Wasting absolutely no time, Saki immediately brings up the dramatic public confession Ayaka recently dealt with, clearly eager to gossip about the shocking spectacle. Ayaka heavily cringes at the memory, complaining to Saki that the entire ordeal was incredibly humiliating and stressful to deal with in front of everyone. Saki casually teases that the guys at school are just as desperate as ever to win the idol over. Ayaka simply groans in response, admitting that she sees boys as nothing but a massive headache. Ayaka opens up about her traumatic past, explaining how constant unwanted confessions from random middle school boys led to her female friends unfairly turning on her out of spite. Thanks to all that toxic jealousy and drama, she essentially gave up on romance and prefers to keep a safe distance from guys altogether. Saki completely sympathizes, questioning the ridiculous concept of love at first sight. Ayaka wholeheartedly agrees, expressing her absolute confusion over how anyone could ever want to date a person without actually getting to know their true personality first. Saki suddenly pitches a wild solution, suggesting Ayaka should just get a fake boyfriend to ward off all the desperate suitors. Ayaka immediately shoots the ridiculous idea down, stubbornly rejecting the suggestion. Refusing to drop it, Saki spins a fun fantasy scenario about Ayaka miraculously meeting a guy who wouldn't constantly hit on her. She argues that entering a fake relationship with someone like that would play out exactly like a perfect romance manga. Saki teasingly points out that Ayaka absolutely loves those kinds of cheesy romance plots. Getting totally flustered, Ayaka reluctantly admits that she actually has a manga with that exact storyline sitting on her bookshelf right now. Saki gets completely carried away with her wild romantic fantasies, predicting that their pretend arrangement will inevitably lead to them actually catching real feelings and becoming a genuine couple. Ayaka immediately snaps at her friend to stop hyping herself up over a completely imaginary scenario. As they leave the cafe, Saki brings up the fact that Ayaka's parents were away on a business trip and casually asks how she managed to handle all the housework and daily chores on her own. Ayaka dramatically complains about how incredibly difficult it was to manage everything by herself for 3 whole days, especially with her demanding little brother constantly nagging her for food. Saki is genuinely impressed by her solo survival skills, but Ayaka sheepishly admits that her mother actually gave her permission to call in some outside help if things got too overwhelming. Ayaka clarifies that she only lasted about 2.5 days on her own before caving and hiring a professional housekeeping service for the final stretch. Saki is totally surprised that was even an option, while Ayaka internally debates whether she should mention that Atsuki was the one who showed up, ultimately deciding to keep it a secret to avoid getting relentlessly teased about it later. Saki asks if an actual professional housekeeper came over, and Ayaka gives a vague confirmation to avoid spilling the truth. Keeping the secret to herself, Ayaka silently reflects on how genuinely impressive his domestic skills were, admitting that she finally understands why Saki described him as such a gentleman. Ayaka continues to reminisce about his calm demeanor and incredibly polite attitude, noting that he acted so mature. It was hard to believe they were even the same age. Recalling his sweet compliment about her being a great older sister, she realizes that despite her usual tendency to avoid guys entirely, she might actually be open to becoming friends with someone like him. Her heartwarming train of thought suddenly hits a roadblock as she remembers a very specific strict boundary he firmly set during his visit. She recalls the exact moment he shut down any casual connection by bluntly reminding her that she was strictly just his client and nothing more. Remembering that cold professional distance leaves her feeling an unexpected wave of disappointment. Her gloomy thoughts are abruptly interrupted when Saki calls out to let her know the crosswalk signal has finally turned green. Snapping back to reality, Ayaka quickly covers up her distraction by claiming she was just spacing out over how unbelievably amazing the housekeeper's skills were, leaving Saki completely bewildered by her intense reaction. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a nearby apartment balcony where someone suddenly calls out to Haru. Haru questions why Tomoya is suddenly hanging out at his place, assuming his friend was supposed to be busy with his summer studies and part-time jobs. Tomoya casually explains that his air conditioner broke down, so he decided to mooch off Haru's electricity instead. Unamused, Haru immediately suggests that Tomoya should clean his room to pay for the power, leaving his friend completely bewildered by the sudden chore request. Shifting the focus, Haru asks if Tomoya ended up buying a new guitar. Tomoya proudly confirms the purchase, explaining that he fell in love with the instrument at first sight, though he admits the impulse left him completely broke for the rest of the summer. Riding the high of his new purchase, Tomoya enthusiastically begs Haru to start a band with him, so they can fully enjoy their fleeting youth. Haru instantly shoots down the grand idea without missing a beat, bluntly stating that he is way too busy juggling his studies and his new part-time job to mess around with music. The mention of work suddenly jogs Tomoya's memory, and he eagerly asks how Haru's very first day at the housekeeping gig actually went. Haru hesitates for a moment, carefully thinking about how to describe the wild experience. Thinking back on the unexpectedly domestic evening he spent at his classmate's house, Haru gives a brief cryptic answer, simply telling Tomoya that the job was incredibly rewarding. He silently recalls the heartwarming moment when Tojo-san smiled and genuinely thanked him for all his hard work, quietly adding to himself that it really was a great experience overall. Picking up on his friend's sudden shift in mood, Tomoya leans in closely and calls out Haru's name, sensing that there is definitely a lot more to the story. Tomoya suspiciously demands to know why Haru is suddenly grinning to himself and tells him to hold on a second as he starts piecing things together. Haru quickly gets defensive, completely denying that he is smiling at all. Tomoya's imagination instantly runs wild as he enthusiastically asks if the client was a gorgeous, exhausted older woman returning from work. He wildly accuses Haru of being a secret pervert and demands to know if something spicy happened on the clock, leaving Haru totally flustered. Haru angrily snaps back to shut down the ridiculous fantasies, calling Tomoya an absolute idiot and loudly blurting out that there is no way anything like that would ever happen with Tojo-san, accidentally exposing his secret client's identity right then and there. Haruto accidentally lets Tojo-san's name slip during their chat, and his friend instantly jumps out of his chair in pure shock. His friend immediately corners him, frantically demanding to know if he is talking about the legendary Ayaka Tojo, while a sweating Haruto desperately tries to backtrack and deny everything. His friend completely refuses to buy the weak cover-up, pointing out that Haruto's highly suspicious reaction totally gave him away, leaving a defeated Haruto realizing his secret is officially out. Haruto desperately pleads with his friend to keep the secret and respect his client's privacy, to which his friend readily agrees, promising that he will not spread any rumors. However, his friend immediately turns into a total fanboy, eagerly pestering Haruto with nosy questions about what her house was like, if it smelled nice, and if he even managed to get inside her room. His friend teases him about the golden opportunity to get close to the school idol over the summer, but a sighing Haruto quickly shoots down the fantasy, arguing that Tojo-san probably found the whole situation too awkward to ever hire him again. His friend remains highly skeptical of his pessimistic attitude, casually lounging back and insisting that he personally would not feel awkward about the situation at all. The conversation shifts to his friend's sister Haruka, who is currently busy with morning summer classes in her determination to get into Haruto's school next year, prompting his friend to mischievously ask if Haruto plans to ditch his sister for Tojo-san. Haruto simply reiterates that the school idol has absolutely no reason to ever call him back. Haruto was completely convinced that his brief awkward encounter with the school idol was a one-time fluke that would never happen again, or so he thought. It turns out his pessimistic prediction was completely off base, as he soon finds himself standing right back in front of her massive mansion for another shift. Haruto finds himself back at the massive mansion, completely racked with anxiety over why Tojo-san booked his services for a second time. He wildly panics, worrying if his signature hamburger steaks somehow went bad and gave her family food poisoning, or if she has some other serious complaint about his work, before desperately forcing himself to stop overthinking and just ring the bell. He activates the intercom and nervously announces his arrival, only for a highly energetic voice on the other end to enthusiastically declare they have been eagerly waiting for him and will pop the door open right away. Hearing the unfamiliar, incredibly cheerful voice, Haruto's confusion deepens as he realizes the speaker is definitely not Tojo-san, leaving him to wonder if he is about to meet her older sister. The front door finally swings open, and a highly elegant woman warmly welcomes him, instantly identifying him as Atsuki-kun. She flashes a dazzling smile and mentions that Ayaka has told her absolutely everything about him, leaving a flustered Haruto to nervously confirm his identity, while internally marveling over who this stunningly elegant lady could possibly be. The charming woman smiles brightly as she welcomes him, reiterating that she has heard a great deal of positive things about him from Ayaka and the rest of the household. Still completely starstruck by her incredibly warm and elegant aura, Haruto can only manage a nervous, stuttering confirmation in response. As she politely thanks him for traveling all the way over in the grueling summer heat, Haruto is completely stunned to learn that Tojo-san actually has an older sister. He is quickly pulled from his thoughts as the enthusiastic sibling ushers him inside, happily telling him to come right on in. As Haruto makes his way toward the entrance alongside the beautiful older woman who just arrived, he notices little Ryota shyly peeking out from behind a nearby door frame. The adorable kid stares with wide eyes as a friendly greeting breaks the ice, welcoming the little guy into the hallway. Haruto politely asks Ryota if he enjoyed the hamburger steak, and the boy happily confirms that it was absolutely delicious. The woman warmly chimes in, playfully noting that Ayaka already told her how completely engrossed the kid was while inhaling his dinner earlier. Ryota excitedly turns to the woman, clearly calling her mom, and cheerfully asking if she agreed that the hamburger was incredibly delicious, which she happily confirms. Haruto initially smiles at the wholesome family dynamic, but his brain suddenly registers the specific title the boy just used, bringing his thoughts to a screeching, confused halt. Haruto reels in absolute shock, completely mind-blown to realize that this stunningly youthful woman is actually Ayaka and Ryota's mother. Ayaka's mother casually explains that both she and her husband run their own company, which unfortunately means they are constantly away from home on business, leaving her feeling quite guilty about leaving the kids alone so often. She goes on to explain that they had to leave on a sudden business trip recently, and were incredibly worried about Ayaka having to manage the entire massive household all by herself. She mentions that they advised Ayaka to rely on a housekeeping service if she ever got overwhelmed, and expresses her deep gratitude for Haruto stepping in, calling his capable help an absolute lifesaver. Haruto humbly replies that he is honored by her satisfaction, while secretly putting the pieces together and realizing that having two company presidents for parents perfectly explains the unbelievably gigantic mansion. Wrapping up his duties, Haruto officially confirms the completion of the 3-hour cleaning and dinner prep course, which the mother cheerfully validates. Standing at the door, he formally thanks them for using the agency and prepares to say his final goodbyes. Just as he is about to leave, Ayaka's mother suddenly calls out his name, stopping him right in his tracks with a mysterious and lingering tone. Ichi recognizes Haruto and warmly asks if he is actually Ayaka's classmate, prompting a very nervous Haruto to politely confirm that he is. Thrilled by the connection, she cheerfully tells him to drop all the stiff formalities and just call her by her first name, though Haruto stammers back that he absolutely cannot do that since she is still officially his client. Ichi refuses to take no for an answer, playfully pouting that he shouldn't say such cold things, and insisting that he be just a little more casual with her. Haruto completely caves under the pressure of her undeniable charm, mentally noting that she is basically a breathtaking grown-up version of the school's prettiest girl. He finally gives in and calls her Ikkyu-san, which sends her into an immediate joyful celebration as she eagerly thanks him. Their lively conversation is suddenly interrupted when Ayaka arrives in the room, casually noting that Haruto actually showed up for his scheduled shift. Haruto gets totally flustered seeing his classmate in her own home and reflexively greets her with an absurdly formal title, but Ayaka quickly corrects him to just use her normal name while warmly welcoming him back. Regaining his professional composure, Haruto thanks them for booking his services again. Ayaka apologetically explains that the moment her mother found out her classmate was the previous housekeeper, she absolutely demanded to meet him in person, not to mention little Ryota had been relentlessly begging to eat his amazing cooking again. Haruto promises to give his absolute best effort for tonight's meal. Ayaka awkwardly tells him she is counting on him, while Ikkyu watches the highly polite exchange between the teenagers with immense amusement. Seeing how ridiculously stiff the two of them are acting around each other, Ikkyu steps in and suggests that since they are literally classmates, they should really try interacting a bit more casually. Ayaka awkwardly admits that despite being in the same class, they have actually never spoken to each other at school. Rather than finding that weird, her mother immediately lights up, declaring that this is the perfect opportunity for the two of them to finally get to know one another. Tojo's mother casually drops the bomb that Ayaka doesn't actually have any male friends, turning directly to a completely bewildered Haruto for confirmation, and leaving him fumbling for a polite response. Seizing the perfect opportunity, the cheerful mother points out that Haruto seems like a genuinely nice guy, and suggests they become friends. A deeply flustered Ayaka immediately begs her mom to stop arguing. She doesn't want to force a friendship, which only prompts her mother to teasingly ask if that means she actually dislikes him. Completely cornered by the relentless teasing, a blushing Ayaka quietly stammers out that it isn't, like she actually opposes the idea of being friends with him. Her mother instantly declares victory, cheerfully concluding that Ayaka definitely wants to be friends. She playfully apologizes to Haruto for her daughter's total inability to be honest about her feelings, leaving him chuckling awkwardly, while Ayaka practically dies of embarrassment. Desperate to escape the wildly awkward family dynamic, Haruto officially shifts back into professional mode and announces he will start cleaning, asking his flustered classmate if she has any specific chores she wants him to tackle first. Taking her request to heart, Haruto gets right down to business and immediately starts scrubbing the glass doors leading to the backyard. Watching him work, Ayaka notes that the windows are actually incredibly dirty. Haruto totally agrees, but confidently assures her that his special cleaning method will have the glass sparkling again in absolutely no time. Little Ryota wanders over and curiously asks why Haruto is using wet, crumpled newspaper instead of a regular cleaning cloth. Haruto reveals a clever housekeeping hack, explaining that the ink from the damp paper actually strips away the stubborn dirt, completely blowing the kid's mind and making him beg to join in on the fun. Happy to encourage her brother's sudden interest in chores, Ayaka hands Ryota some newspaper and points out a spot for him to tackle. She then turns to Haruto and politely apologizes for her energetic little brother interfering with his professional workflow. Haruto flashes a warm smile and instantly brushes off the apology, assuring her that he actually really appreciates having Ryota as his dedicated little cleaning assistant. Watching Haruto and Ryota bond so easily, Ayaka's mother playfully comments on how quickly her son has attached himself to the housekeeper, noting that they already act like real brothers. Ayaka, who had been completely spacing out, awkwardly stammers in agreement. Noticing her daughter's distracted state, Ikkyu leans in with a mischievous grin and asks if Ayaka is actually pouting out of jealousy over Ryota stealing all of Haruto's attention. Before Ayaka can even process that accusation, her mother drops an even bigger bombshell, teasingly suggesting that Ayaka was actually just caught totally mesmerized by their handsome classmate. The sudden call-out leaves Ayaka completely panicked, and she furiously demands to know what her mother is talking about. Ikkyu just laughs at the intense reaction, warmly attributing her daughter's flustered state to the adorable struggles of youth. Ayaka fiercely denies the accusation, insisting that her mother is completely misreading the situation. The situation gets even worse when little Ryota wanders into the room and immediately points out how incredibly red his big sister's face is, innocently asking if she has come down with a sudden fever. Completely mortified by the innocent call-out, Ayaka loudly denies having a fever before storming out of the living room, dramatically declaring that she is completely done with this conversation. Ryota watches her leave, in total confusion, asking his mom what is wrong with his sister. Ikkyu simply chuckles to herself, happily noting that Ayaka is just finally experiencing the fun emotional ups and downs of normal teenage life. Watching the diligent high schooler quietly continue his chores, Ikkyu secretly hopes that this unexpected arrangement might finally bring a much-needed romantic spring into her daughter's otherwise stressful life. Haruto eventually wraps up his tasks and reports back to Ikkyu, officially announcing that he has finished the cleaning and asking if she has any final requests. She happily assures him that everything is perfect and sincerely thanks him for his hard work. Ikkyu expresses her deep gratitude, admitting that having him handle the incredibly time-consuming chores finally allowed her to have a fully productive day working from home. Haruto smiles warmly, genuinely glad that he could be of such great assistance to their family. Ready to tackle dinner, Haruto casually asks if she has any specific menu requests. Tojo-san thinks it over, mentioning that since it is incredibly hot outside, something refreshing would hit the spot. However, she also points out that little Ryuta has a huge appetite right now, so the meal needs to be super filling as well. Taking her exact preferences into account, Haruto confidently pitches a mouth-watering menu featuring lemon-flavored cream pasta, paired with cold soup, and a fresh capre salad. The proposed tanginess hits all the right refreshing notes, and Tojo-san immediately lights up, praising the incredibly stylish and wonderful dinner idea. There is just one minor setback, as Tojo-san shyly admits their fridge is completely empty at the moment. Haruto seamlessly offers to handle the grocery run as well, but he gets the shock of his life when she casually hands him a massive stack of 10,000 yen bills, completely casually asking if the massive sum will be enough to cover the ingredients. Sweating bullets over the absurd amount of cash, Haruto nervously laughs and assures her that the small fortune is way more than enough. He silently marvels at the sheer financial gap between them, before switching back to business mode to ask if she prefers any specific grocery stores or high-end items. Tojo-san shakes her head, leaving the shopping entirely in his capable hands, and simply checks to make sure he knows where the local supermarket is located. Haruto confirms he knows the way, announcing that he is heading out right now to grab all the dinner supplies. Overhearing the commotion, little Ryuta groggily snaps awake, curiously asking where his favorite new big brother is going. Tojo-san gently explains that Haruto is just stepping out to buy groceries for their dinner, which Haruto happily confirms. Ryuta instantly gets completely hyped up, demanding to tag along on the grocery run. Tojo-san immediately shoots the idea down, firmly reminding her little brother that Haruto is not going out to play and is actually on the clock for work, so he needs to stay home and wait patiently. The harsh rejection instantly crushes Ryuta's excitement, leaving the little guy looking incredibly devastated, as he quietly mumbles that he even helped his big brother clean earlier. Seeing her brother completely pout, Tojo-san lets out a worried sigh, noting that Ryuta is usually super obedient and rarely acts up like this. She gives Haruto a soft smile, admitting that the kid must have genuinely grown incredibly attached to him. Standing quietly off to the side, completely heartbroken, Ryuta struggles to hold back his disappointment, looking down with big, teary eyes as he silently sulks over being left behind. Haruto offers to let Ryuta come along on his grocery run. The mother is worried that asking him to both shop and watch her son is asking for too much, but when Haruto insists he doesn't mind, she suddenly lights up with a brilliant idea. Ayaka finally joins them, apologizing for keeping everyone waiting while wearing an incredibly stylish casual outfit. Haruto is instantly mesmerized, internally fanboying over how cute she looks, and concluding that absolutely anything she wears looks completely amazing on her. Her mother immediately seizes the opportunity to matchmake, declaring that she is leaving Ryuta in Ayaka's care for the trip, which forces Ayaka to tag along for the shopping run too. Her mother teasingly whispers that she definitely has absolutely no ulterior motives in sending the two of them off together, leaving a highly flustered Ayaka groaning at her mother's obvious meddling. An incredibly impatient Ryuta starts urging his older sister to hurry up, prompting a slightly exasperated Ayaka to tell him to slow down. With a pleased and warm smile, her mother bids them a final farewell as they get ready to step out. With Ryuta leading the charge and loudly cheering that they are off, Haruto and Ayaka officially head out the door together to go buy groceries. As they walk together down the street, Ryuta has the absolute time of his life riding high on Haruto's shoulders. Ayaka apologizes for her little brother selfishly tagging along on their errand, but Haruto easily brushes it off, assuring her he really does not mind the extra company at all. Ayaka silently watches the two of them interact, reflecting on the wild reality that the school's ultimate beauty actually hired a classmate for housekeeping, and his incredible service ended up completely winning over her entire family. She suddenly recalls her mother cheekily winking and claiming she totally did not have any ulterior motives when setting this whole situation up, prompting Ayaka to internally groan at her mom's embarrassingly obvious teasing. Stealing a quick glance at the boys, Ayaka listens as Haruto checks in to make sure Ryuta is not scared of being up so high, prompting the energetic kid to loudly declare that he is perfectly fine. Strolling alongside them, Ayaka breaks the peaceful silence and genuinely compliments Haruto, telling him that he is an incredibly kind person. She points out how wonderfully he is taking care of her little brother, which catches Haruto slightly off guard. He modestly laughs off the praise, guessing that he is just naturally enjoying the company since he is so used to being an only child. Haruto cheerfully explains that hanging out with Ryuta genuinely delights him, admitting that the fun experience makes him finally understand what it actually feels like to have a real little brother of his own. Ayaka flashes a playful smirk and warns him not to get too comfortable, teasingly telling Haruto to just wait until he finally has to deal with her brother's selfish and totally uncute tantrums, earning a nervous laugh from the housekeeper. Feeling a bit left out of the conversation, Ryuta chimes in to ask his older sister what she is whispering about with his favorite new big brother. Ayaka smoothly covers by claiming they were just discussing how much the two of them look like actual siblings, before officially announcing their arrival at the supermarket and ordering Ryuta to finally climb down. Arriving at the local supermarket, Tojo turns to Haruto and casually asks what he plans on whipping up for dinner tonight. Haruto lists off a few staple ingredients like milk fresh cream and bacon, adding that he wants to grab some cheap green vegetables to give the dish a nice pop of color. Taking this, as his cute little Ryota suddenly bolts off down the aisle, leaving a panicked Tojo calling out after him. The energetic kid enthusiastically calls out to Haruto, proudly pointing at the produce section to show off the green vegetables he quickly tracked down. Haruto checks out the asparagus and is thrilled to see it on sale, showering Ryota with praise for his excellent scouting skills, and leaving the little guy absolutely beaming with pride. With the grocery trip in full swing, Haruto smoothly steps in and offers to take over carrying the heavy shopping basket for Tojo. She hands the basket over with a polite word of thanks, but quickly falls completely silent, her eyes locking onto him in deep thought. Noticing her intense, unblinking stare burning into the side of his head, a confused Haruto pauses to ask if something is wrong. Completely out of nowhere, Tojo drops a massive conversational bombshell, bluntly asking him if he currently has a girlfriend. Haruto violently flinches in shock and awkwardly stammers out that he is completely single, prompting Tojo to calmly accept the answer, as if it were just a casual piece of trivia. Haruto explains he is holding the shopping basket because he is technically on the clock, and carrying his client's belongings is just a standard part of the job. Ayaka tells him he looks so incredibly natural doing it that she assumed he was just totally used to helping out like this. Moving along the produce section, Haruto points out a great bargain on pumpkins and suggests they whip up a cold pumpkin pottage soup for dinner. Ryota immediately gets hyped and reaches for one of the pumpkins, prompting a warm smile from Haruto, while Ayaka quietly watches the sweet interaction between them. Haruto turns to Ayaka and asks for her official permission to buy a whole pumpkin, catching her completely off guard as she stammers in response. Blushing furiously, Ayaka quickly nods and agrees that getting the whole pumpkin is a great idea, which Haruto happily confirms. With the pumpkin secured, Haruto suggests they head over to grab some tomatoes next, and Ryota excitedly cheers for the new vegetable as they continue their shopping trip. The automatic glass doors of the supermarket slide open as the group finally finishes up their grocery run. Stepping outside, Haruto lets out a small sigh of relief, but immediately notices some random guys walking past who are completely glued to Ayaka. Hearing the guys whisper about how breathtakingly gorgeous and celebrity-like she looks, Haruto realizes that Ayaka had been drawing those intense stares the entire time they were inside the store. Putting the pieces together, Haruto sympathetically points out that it must be incredibly exhausting for her to constantly deal with being in crowded places, leaving Ayaka totally surprised by his sudden consideration. Ayaka recalls that, while she has recently gotten used to the spotlight, there were plenty of times when she felt like people's intense, lingering gazes were incredibly creepy and honestly quite terrifying. Listening to her vent, Haruto casually chuckles and notes that he supposes it must be tough dealing with all that pressure when you are such an incredibly cute girl. The sudden, completely nonchalant compliment catches Ayaka entirely off guard, making her stutter in absolute shock as she tries to process him calling her cute. Haruto notices her sudden shift in behavior and asks if something is wrong, prompting a completely panicked Ayaka to frantically deny everything and insist she is totally fine. Internally, though, her mind is racing as she frantically panics over the fact that Atsuki-kun casually thinks of her as a cutie. She tries to calm her racing heart, desperately reasoning that he was just being polite to a paying customer, though she still finds the smooth, casual delivery of the compliment highly frustrating. Her intense panicking is suddenly cut short when her little brother Ryota-kun curiously asks why her face is so bright red, completely startling her. She quickly covers up the embarrassment, loudly claiming it is only because the weather is so incredibly hot, and demands they hurry back home. The front door finally unlocks, and Haruto calls out to let the household know that they have returned. Stepping inside, Haruto is greeted warmly by Tojo-san's father, who welcomes them back and politely asks if he is indeed Atsuki-kun, the scheduled housekeeper. Haruto's attention is suddenly drawn to the front entrance as someone new arrives at the house, prompting a startled reaction from the young housekeeper. Ryuta excitedly sprints down the hallway to welcome his father home. The man warmly greets his son and asks how their grocery shopping errand went, leaving a stunned Haruto to realize he is finally face to face with Tojo-san's dad. Holding his energetic son, the man politely introduces himself to the young worker as Ayaka and Ryuta's father. Haruto quickly matches his respectful tone, formally introducing himself as Atsuki, the hired housekeeper for the evening. Ayaka walks into the room and cheerfully points out that her father managed to get home from work surprisingly early today. Her dad easily admits that he purposefully wrapped things up ahead of schedule, specifically because he knew it was the day their favorite housekeeper was scheduled to come over. Giving Haruto a grateful thumbs up, her father highly praises the phenomenal hamburger steaks from the previous visit, and cheerfully declares he is really looking forward to tonight's meal. Haruto smiles and confidently promises to do his absolute best to exceed the family's high expectations. Fully fired up and ready to deliver, Haruto heads straight into the kitchen and enthusiastically kicks off the dinner preparation, wasting absolutely no time getting to work. Shifting into high gear, he flawlessly multitasks his way through the fresh ingredients, thinly slicing the pumpkin for the microwave while simultaneously prepping the asparagus for the pasta. He takes a moment to admire a perfectly ripe tomato, fully determined to use every ounce of his skill to cook a culinary masterpiece for the entire Tojo household. Watching from the sidelines, Ayaka and her father are completely mesmerized by his blazing fast, highly efficient cooking techniques. Her dad likens him to a seasoned veteran chef, while Ayaka wholeheartedly agrees, marveling at his incredible coordination and musing that boys who can cook are absolutely wonderful. Hearing the glowing praise, a slightly flustered Haruto politely thanks them for the kind compliments. He promises to work just as hard to make sure the food actually tastes as good as it looks, earning a very satisfied nod of approval from her dad. Highly impressed by the young man's stellar dedication, her father notes how surprising it is to find such a hardworking boy in Ayaka's class, and casually asks his daughter if she and Atsuki are close at school. Caught completely off guard by the sudden question, a nervous Ayaka quickly stammers out that they actually are not very close at all. As Haruto handles the cooking in the background, Ayaka's father takes in the situation. Ikkyu chimes in, explaining that she felt so comfortable with the arrangement simply because Atsuki is such an incredibly earnest and sincere young man. Her dad completely agrees, calling the whole unexpected setup a stroke of fate. He then completely blindsides Ayaka by declaring he would be absolutely thrilled to use this opportunity to get closer to his daughter, hoping she and Haruto can finally become good friends as classmates. The sudden enthusiastic endorsement leaves Ayaka totally flustered as she loudly protests her dad's embarrassing remarks. Despite her initial protests, Ayaka quickly caves under her parents' warm and affectionate gazes. Blushing furiously, she awkwardly stammers out an agreement, quietly accepting their gentle push to actually start connecting with her classmate. Meanwhile, Haruto is suddenly interrupted from his kitchen duties when little Ryota wanders over and sweetly calls out for his favorite new big brother. Haruto turns around and gently asks the boy what is on his mind. Looking up with big hopeful eyes, Ryota directly asks if Haruto will join their family for dinner tonight, completely catching the hardworking high schooler off guard with the wholesome invitation. Ayaka's dad immediately backs up the idea, warmly inviting Haruto to grab a seat at the table. Haruto awkwardly tries to decline the generous offer, politely explaining that while he appreciates the gesture, he really needs to maintain his professional boundaries since he is technically just there to do a job. Ikkyu quickly steps in to shut down his corporate excuses, playfully reminding him about their earlier conversation and insisting he needs to relax and act like a normal classmate around them. Completely cornered by the cheerful parents, Haruto turns to Ayaka and tentatively asks if having him crash their family dinner would make things too awkward for her. Ayaka flashes a soft smile and genuinely assures him that she is completely fine with the idea. Her dad happily chimes in to back her up, reiterating that he absolutely doesn't mind the extra company at the table either. A quiet, intense moment of eye contact passes between the two teenagers, as the reality of the situation settles in, marking a massive and unexpected shift in their previously distant classmate dynamic. Watching the adorable nervous tension brewing between the two high schoolers, Ikkyu and her husband quietly chuckle to themselves in the background, absolutely loving how perfectly their little matchmaking setup is working out. Since everyone in the house the surname Tojo, the father introduces himself as Shuichi and insists that Haruto address him by his first name from now on. Accepting the new naming arrangement, Haruto politely addresses him as Shuichi-san and confirms if it is truly all right for him to stay and join the family for dinner, which Shuichi happily approves. Realizing that calling his classmate Tojo-san would now be incredibly confusing for everyone at the table. Haruto blushes and asks if it is all right to address her as Ayaka-san as well. Ayaka is instantly caught completely off guard, blushing deeply, as she softly replies that she is perfectly fine with him calling her by her first name. While Haruto stands completely mind-blown that he actually just called his popular classmate by her first name, he is suddenly snapped back to reality by a gentle tug on his apron. He looks down to find Ryuta eagerly looking up, wanting to confirm if his favorite big brother is officially staying to eat dinner with them tonight. Haruto warmly confirms the good news, sending an ecstatic Ryuta into a wild celebration, before getting right back to work with absolute determination to cook up the most legendary meal possible. Apologizing for the brief wait, Haruto serves up the finished culinary masterpiece, consisting of fresh lemon cream pasta, cold pumpkin pottage soup, and capre salad. The family is absolutely blown away by the stunning presentation, marveling that the dining table feels exactly like a high-end Italian restaurant, while a grateful Ayaka thanks him for the meal. With Shuichi leading the way, the entire table happily delivers a collective greeting of gratitude as they finally begin their wonderful family dinner together. Ryuta aggressively wolfs down the spaghetti, his eyes wide, as he loudly declares the meal absolutely delicious. Ayaka laughs at her little brother's intense enthusiasm and gently reminds him to slow down so he doesn't accidentally choke on his food. The praise continues as Ayaka's dad chimes in, comparing the entire spread to upper-class cuisine. Her mom wholeheartedly agrees, specifically complimenting the perfectly seasoned pottage soup, which prompts a very humble Haruto to thank them both and express his relief that the menu actually suits their tastes. As the family happily continues eating, Haruto watches them with a warm, satisfied smile, clearly enjoying the peaceful domestic atmosphere he helped create for the evening. Haruto silently wonders if Ayaka is enjoying the food just as much, catching a glimpse of her soft, contented smile as she eats. His quiet observation is suddenly interrupted by Ryuta, who completely clears his plate and loudly begs his favorite big brother for another serving. Ayaka immediately shifts into strict older sister mode, scolding Ryuta and telling him that if he wants seconds, he needs to properly finish everything currently on his plate first. Ryuta obediently agrees to the rule while their mom watches the sibling dynamic with a fond smile. The mealtime chatter momentarily pauses as Ayaka's dad suddenly calls out Haruto's name with a surprisingly serious expression. The serious tension instantly evaporates when her dad playfully rubs his head and asks if there is enough food for him to grab a second helping as well. Ayaka is completely caught off guard by the request, exasperatedly pointing out how unbelievably fast her dad managed to inhale his first plate. Haruto easily accommodates the request, grabbing the empty plate with a friendly confirmation. Seeing his dad score another serving, Ryuta gets totally jealous and immediately thrusts his own plate forward, loudly complaining about the unfairness and demanding his own second helping right away. While Haruto heads back to the kitchen counter to dish out the extra portions, Ayaka's dad casually asks where he learned to cook so well. Haruto proudly credits his grandmother, explaining that she thoroughly drilled both cooking and basic household chores into him, prompting her dad to warmly praise the woman for raising him so well. Curious about his culinary range, Ayaka asks Haruto what his absolute best specialty dishes are. As Haruto successfully delivers the fresh plates back to her dad, and Ryuta, he hums in thought before casually rattling off a list of complex traditional Japanese comfort foods like braised chicken and beef stew, proving his skills go way beyond simple diner-style meals. Ikkyu playfully remarks that she wishes she could have tasted Haruto's famous hamburger steaks, teasingly noting that his incredible cooking has completely won over her daughter's stomach. Ayaka turns bright red and frantically begs her mother to stop saying such weirdly suggestive things, while Ikkyu just giggles and offers a completely unapologetic apology, leaving her daughter to groan in pure embarrassment. Stepping in to save the conversation, Ayaka's father cheerfully agrees that he absolutely wants to taste more of Haruto's amazing cooking in the future, pulling out a familiar piece of paper to officially bring up a new proposition. Haruto's eyes go wide with surprise the second he recognizes the exact document the father just placed on the table. Staring down at the agency's promotional flyer for fixed-term contracts, Haruto listens as Ikkyu warmly explains that their entire family is completely satisfied with his phenomenal housekeeping services. With everyone gathered around the table, the father formally announces their decision to lock in a regular fixed-term contract with Haruto ensuring he continues working for their family moving forward. Haruto quickly accepts the offer, respectfully thanking them for their trust and declaring that he is beyond happy to serve their family. The parents eagerly welcome him aboard, insisting that they are the ones who should be expressing their gratitude. Mentally processing the fact that he is now officially employed by the Tojo family for the entire rest of his summer break, Haruto silently worries if his popular classmate might actually feel awkward or uncomfortable having him around so much. However, shooting a quiet, lingering glance in his direction, Ayaka's expression shows absolutely no signs of annoyance or discomfort. Instead, she flashes him a breathtakingly warm and genuine smile, playfully telling him to do a good job for them, as she fully welcomes him into her daily summer life. Haruto nervously bows and formally places himself in the family's care, leaving him to wonder if this professional arrangement is destined to turn into a much longer and deeper relationship than he ever originally bargained for. Haruto effortlessly carries a thrilled Ryota on his shoulders as they head out to buy dinner. Ayaka apologizes for her little brother's selfish request, but Haruto easily brushes it off, assuring her that he truly does not mind the extra company at all. Ayaka suddenly recalls her mother's cheeky wink and blatantly obvious lie about not having any ulterior motives when she sent them off together, prompting Ayaka to internally groan at the embarrassing meddling. Stealing a quick glance at the boys, Ayaka listens, as Haruto gently checks to make sure Ryota is not scared of being up so high, prompting the energetic kid to loudly declare that he is perfectly fine. Strolling alongside them, Ayaka breaks the peaceful silence and genuinely compliments Haruto, telling him that he is an incredibly kind person. She points out how wonderfully he is taking care of her little brother, which catches Haruto slightly off guard. He modestly laughs off the praise, guessing that he just naturally enjoys the company since he grew up as an only child. Haruto cheerfully explains that hanging out with Ryota genuinely delights him, admitting that the fun experience makes him finally understand what it actually feels like to have a real little brother of his own. Ayaka flashes a playful smirk and warns him not to get too comfortable, teasingly telling Haruto to just wait until he finally has to deal with her brother's selfish and totally uncute tantrums, earning a nervous laugh from the housekeeper. Feeling a bit left out of the conversation, Ryota chimes in to ask his older sister what she is whispering about with his favorite new big brother. Ayaka smoothly covers by claiming they were just discussing how much the two of them look like actual siblings, before officially announcing their arrival at the supermarket and ordering Ryota to finally climb down. Arriving at the local supermarket, Haruto turns to Tojo-san and casually asks what exactly they need to buy for today's menu. Haruto starts listing off the essential ingredients like milk, heavy cream, and bacon. Before he can finish his thought about needing some cheap green vegetables for color, little Ryota suddenly bolts down the aisle, leaving a panicked Tojo-san calling out after him. The energetic kid enthusiastically calls out to Haruto, proudly pointing at the produce section to show off the perfect green vegetables he just tracked down. Haruto grabs a bundle of asparagus and is thrilled to see it is on sale, warmly praising Ryota for his excellent scouting skills and leaving the little guy absolutely beaming with pride. With the grocery trip in full swing, Haruto smoothly steps up and offers to take over, carrying the heavy shopping basket for Tojo-san. She hands the basket over with a polite word of thanks, but quickly falls completely silent, her eyes locking onto him as she gets lost in her own thoughts. Noticing her intense, unblinking stare practically burning a hole in his head, a confused Haruto pauses to ask if something happened. Completely out of nowhere, Tojo-san drops a massive conversational bombshell, looking him right in the eye and bluntly asking if he currently has a girlfriend. The sudden question makes Haruto flinch in absolute shock, and he awkwardly stammers out that he is completely single, prompting Tojo-san to smile softly and calmly accept his answer. Ayaka comments on how naturally he took over carrying the basket, guessing he is just completely used to doing that kind of thing. Haruto explains that since he is currently on the clock as her housekeeper, he obviously could not make his client's family member carry the heavy groceries, which Ayaka quietly accepts. As they stroll past the produce section, Haruto notices a great deal on pumpkins and suggests they buy one to whip up a chilled pumpkin soup for dinner. Little Ryota eagerly runs over to check out the produce, and Haruto gently shows him one of the pumpkins, leaving the curious kid highly fascinated. Haruto turns to Ayaka and asks if it is okay to buy an entire pumpkin, catching her completely off guard as she blushes and stammers in response. Trying to hide her sudden blush, Ayaka quickly nods and agrees that getting the pumpkin is perfectly fine, prompting a cheerful acknowledgement from Haruto. Moving along, Haruto announces that their next target is the tomato section, a choice that Ryota enthusiastically cheers for. Stepping outside the store, Haruto lets out a small sigh of relief, but immediately notices a pair of random guys passing by who are completely glued to them, making him wonder what is going on. He overhears the passers-by whispering about how stylish and cute they look, even wondering if they might be actual celebrities. The gossip suddenly makes Haruto realize that he had felt like they were being watched the entire time they were shopping. Realizing just how much attention they were drawing, Haruto sympathetically notes to Ayaka that it must be incredibly tough for her to deal with such intense crowds all the time, prompting a quiet, surprised agreement from the school idol. Ayaka admits that while she has gotten somewhat used to the constant attention, she still feels incredibly uncomfortable when she catches guys giving her slimy stares. Noting that people are completely focusing on her chest, Haruto sympathetically agrees that dealing with those creepy moments must be genuinely terrifying. Haruto casually follows up, nonchalantly remarking that being way too cute clearly comes with its own tough set of problems. The completely unexpected compliment hits Ayaka like a truck, leaving her completely stunned as she mentally replays the word cute in absolute disbelief. Blushing furiously, Ayaka frantically wonders if Haruto genuinely just called her cute. When a confused Haruto checks in to see if something is wrong, she desperately waves him off and insists that absolutely nothing is the matter. Little Ryota innocently chimes in to point out that his older sister's face is bright red. Meanwhile, Ayaka desperately tries to calm her racing thoughts, attempting to write the casual compliment off as just standard polite customer service rather than genuine flirting. Completely overwhelmed by embarrassment, Ayaka dramatically blames her flushed face on the blazing summer heat and practically sprints ahead, frantically demanding that they hurry back home. The group finally arrives back at the mansion, and Haruto pushes the front door open, politely announcing their return to the household. Stepping inside, they are immediately greeted by Ayaka's father, who warmly welcomes them home and checks to confirm if the young man standing before him is Atsuki from the housekeeping service. His attention suddenly drawn to the front entrance, Haruto pauses and politely acknowledges the sound of someone new arriving at the house. Little Ryota excitedly sprints down the hallway to welcome his father home. The man warmly greets his son and asks how their grocery shopping went, leaving a startled Haruto to realize he is finally face to face with Tojo's dad. Holding his energetic son, the man politely introduces himself to the young worker as Ayaka and Ryota's father. Haruto quickly matches his respectful tone, formally introducing himself as Atsuki, the hired housekeeper. Ayaka walks into the room and cheerfully points out that her father managed to get home from work surprisingly early today. Her dad easily admits that he purposefully wrapped things up ahead of schedule, specifically because he knew Mr. Atsuki was scheduled to come over. Giving Haruto an enthusiastic thumbs up, her father praises the phenomenal hamburger steaks from the previous visit and cheerfully declares he is really looking forward to tonight's meal as well. Haruto smiles and confidently promises to do his absolute best to meet the family's high expectations. Fully fired up and ready to deliver, Haruto heads straight into the kitchen and enthusiastically kicks off the dinner preparation, wasting absolutely no time getting to work. Shifting into high gear, he flawlessly multitasks his way through the fresh ingredients, dicing the pumpkin for the microwave, while simultaneously snapping the asparagus for the pasta. He takes a moment to admire a perfectly ripe tomato, fully determined to put his whole heart into cooking for the Tojo family. Watching from the sidelines, Ayaka and her father are completely mesmerized by his highly efficient cooking techniques. Ayaka marvels at his incredible skills and muses that guys who can cook are absolutely amazing, while her dad wholeheartedly agrees, likening his smooth movements to a professional chef. Hearing the glowing praise, Haruto politely thanks them for the kind compliments. He promises to work just as hard to make sure the food actually tastes great and satisfies everyone, earning a very thoughtful nod of approval from her dad. Ayaka's father highly praises Haruto for being exceptionally reliable and responsible for his age, before directly asking his daughter if she and Atsuki-kun are close friends at school, prompting a sheepish Ayaka to admit they aren't actually that close yet. Hearing her answer, her father thoughtfully nods, but notes that Atsuki-kun seems like a remarkably sincere and honest young man. Her father enthusiastically encourages Haruto to use this perfect opportunity to become friends with his daughter, causing an embarrassed Ayaka to protest loudly. But Haruto warmly agrees that their meeting feels like fate and expresses his own sincere hope that they can become good friends. With a soft, incredibly shy smile, Ayaka gently confesses that she completely those same feelings about wanting to become friends with him, which brings massive pleased grins to her parents' faces. The heartwarming moment is suddenly interrupted when little Ryota calls out to Haruto, prompting the busy high schooler to turn his attention back to the boy and kindly ask what is wrong. Ryota innocently looks up and asks Haruto if he is going to stay and eat dinner with them tonight, completely catching the hardworking housekeeper off guard. Her father quickly backs up the kid's invitation, warmly offering for Haruto to stay and eat with them, but a hesitant Haruto politely tries to decline by explaining that he is technically on the clock for work and does not want to be a nuisance. Ikkyu immediately steps in to dismiss his worries, urging him to relax and make himself at ease since he is her daughter's classmate, though Haruto still tentatively checks in with Ayaka to make sure his presence wouldn't make things too awkward for her. Her father warmly declares that he does not mind having him at the table in the slightest, while a gentle Ayaka officially reassures him that she is completely fine with him staying. The quiet gaze between the two teenagers marks a profound and exciting shift in their dynamics, setting a sweet and hopeful new tone for the rest of their summer break. Sharing a lighthearted moment, Ayaka and her dad softly chuckle together as the lingering tension at the table completely melts away. Her dad playfully points out that since everyone in the house the exact same surname, things could get pretty confusing. He officially introduces himself as Shuichi and insists that Haruto just call him by his first name from now on. Testing the waters, Haruto awkwardly addresses him as Shuichi-san and double-checks if it is truly all right for him to crash the family dinner, earning an immediate and enthusiastic approval in response. Realizing the new naming rule naturally applies to the rest of the table, a deeply flustered Haruto stammers and asks if it is okay for him to start calling his classmate Ayaka by her first name as well. Caught slightly off guard by the request, a blushing Ayaka flashes a soft smile and gives him the green light, confirming that she is perfectly fine with the casual arrangement. Haruto stands there completely stunned, absolutely mind-blown that the day has actually come where he gets to call the untouchable school idol by her first name, until a gentle tap on his apron snaps him right back to reality. He looks down to find a sparkling-eyed Ryota eagerly looking up at him, practically vibrating with excitement, as he asks if his favorite big brother is officially staying to eat with them. Haruto warmly confirms that they are definitely having dinner together, sending the little guy into an ecstatic cheer, before confidently declaring that he is going to whip up the absolute best dish ever for the occasion. After a brief wait, Haruto proudly serves up a breathtaking culinary masterpiece, presenting a gorgeous spread of chilled pumpkin soup, fresh lemon-flavored cream pasta, and capre salad. The entire family is absolutely dazzled by the stunning feast laid out before them, with Ayaka gratefully thanking him for his hard work, while someone marvels that their dining room suddenly feels exactly like a high-end restaurant. With everything set, Shuichi takes the lead and invites everyone to dig in, prompting the entire table to a collective greeting of gratitude before starting their highly anticipated family meal. Ryota wastes absolutely no time shoving a massive bite of spaghetti into his mouth, his eyes widening in pure shock as he loudly declares the dish super delicious. Amused by his frantic eating, Ayaka gently scolds her little brother and tells him to slow down before he ends up choking on his food. The glowing praise continues as Ayaka's dad chimes in, comparing the entire spread to a meal from a fancy restaurant. Her mom wholeheartedly agrees, specifically complimenting the perfectly seasoned soup, which prompts a very humble Haruto to thank them both and express his relief that the menu suits their tastes. As the family happily continues eating in comfortable silence, Haruto watches them with a warm, satisfied smile, clearly enjoying the peaceful domestic atmosphere he helped create for the evening. Haruto silently wonders if Ayaka is enjoying the food just as much, catching a glimpse of her soft, contented smile as she eats. His quiet observation is suddenly interrupted by Ryota, who completely clears his plate and loudly begs his favorite big brother for another serving. Ayaka immediately shifts into strict older sister mode, scolding Ryota and telling him that if he wants seconds, he needs to properly finish everything currently on his plate first. Ryota obediently agrees to the rule, while their mom watches the sibling dynamic with a fond smile. The mealtime chatter momentarily pauses as Ayaka's dad suddenly calls out Haruto's name with a surprisingly serious expression. The serious tension instantly evaporates when her dad playfully rubs his head and asks if there is enough food for him to grab a second helping as well. Ayaka is completely caught off guard by the request, exasperatedly pointing out how unbelievably fast her dad managed to inhale his first plate. Haruto easily accommodates the request, grabbing the empty plate with a friendly confirmation. Seeing his dad score another serving, Ryota gets totally jealous and immediately thrusts his own plate forward, loudly complaining about the unfairness and demanding his own second helping right away. While Haruto heads back to the kitchen counter to dish out the extra portions, Ayaka's dad casually asks where he learned to cook so well. Haruto proudly credits his grandmother, explaining that she thoroughly drilled both cooking and basic household chores into him. Ayaka's mother asks Haruto what his absolute best dish is. As he finishes serving the food, he thinks for a moment and casually lists off traditional comfort foods like nikujaga and chikyuzeni as his top specialties, right alongside his famous hamburger steaks. Taking a bite of her meal, Ayaka quietly admits that she would actually love to try his nikujaga someday. Her mom instantly seizes the opportunity to tease her, playfully gasping and asking if Haruto's incredible cooking has already managed to completely win her daughter's heart through her stomach. Completely flustered by the sudden romantic teasing, Ayaka turns bright red and frantically begs her mother to stop blurting out such weirdly suggestive things at the dinner table. The dad quickly chimes in to save his daughter from the embarrassment, pointing to his completely empty plate and casually mentioning that he would also love to try out more of Haruto's amazing cooking. Wrapping up his thought, the dad officially states that he genuinely wants to keep eating Haruto's meals from now on. Ikkyu wholeheartedly agrees with her husband's glowing review, smoothly reaching into a nearby drawer to pull out a specific piece of paper as she calls for Haruto's attention. Haruto's eyes go wide with absolute surprise the second he recognizes the familiar document she just placed right in front of him. Staring down at the agency's official promotional flyer for fixed-term contracts, Haruto listens as Ikkyu warmly explains that their entire family is completely blown away and entirely satisfied with his phenomenal housekeeping services. With everyone gathered around the table, the father formally announces their decision to lock in a regular long-term contract, making it explicitly clear that they are specifically requesting Haruto to continue working for their family moving forward. Haruto stammers for a brief second before gratefully accepting the offer, respectfully thanking them for the opportunity and declaring that he is beyond happy to keep serving them. Shuichi eagerly waves off the thanks, insisting that the family is the one who owes him their gratitude, while Ikkyu cheerfully welcomes him aboard and asks that they all get along well from now on. Mentally processing the massive reality check that he is now officially employed by the Tojo household for the rest of his summer break, Haruto silently worries if his popular classmate might actually feel super awkward or uncomfortable having him invade her personal space so often. Ayaka meets his gaze with a look of warm reassurance, silently making it clear that she is completely on board with having him work for her family. Breaking her silent gaze, Ayaka offers a gentle, genuine smile and officially welcomes him, telling Atsuki-kun that she looks forward to getting along with him from now on. Feeling a bit flustered but incredibly grateful, Haruto politely asks the entire family to take good care of him, silently reflecting on the surprising reality that they will be spending a lot more time together than he ever expected. Early the next morning, Haruto finds himself awake at his desk before dawn, letting out a heavy sigh as he reflects on his sudden new lifestyle after signing the housekeeping contract with his popular classmate's family. He thinks back to how he managed to completely win over the entire household, with his work recalling their warm smiles and enthusiastic acceptance of him. Most of all, he remembers Ayaka's beautiful, supportive smile as she playfully told him to do well for them, cementing his commitment to the new arrangement. His early morning trip down memory lane is suddenly cut short when a series of loud, chaotic clattering and thudding noises echo from elsewhere in the house, catching him completely off guard. Haruto wakes up early and walks into the kitchen, warmly greeting his grandmother with a cheerful good morning, which she happily returns. His grandmother asks if he is already up studying so early again, which he readily confirms, before eagerly pointing out that she is cooking tamagoyaki. Pouring out the dashi, she casually asks if he wants miso soup and spinach on the side, and he leaves the final menu completely up to her. With breakfast finally ready, the two of them sit down at the table together and deliver a quick, appreciative pre-meal greeting before digging into the food. Taking a bite of the tamagoyaki, Haruto totally melts at the delicious flavor and playfully asks how his own cooking skills stack up against hers. His grandmother just laughs warmly, assuring him that his tamagoyaki tastes pretty great too. Haruto shifts the conversation to his new part-time gig, crediting her strict domestic training for his massive success. He proudly reveals that the hamburger steaks he made on his very first day were a total hit, with the clients heavily praising the meal and claiming it tasted like actual high-end fancy food. His grandmother smiles brightly, absolutely thrilled to hear that his hard work is paying off so well. Haruto takes another bite of his breakfast and genuinely thanks her again for everything she taught him. A brief moment of quiet settles over the table as Haruto peacefully continues eating, but his grandmother suddenly breaks the silence, her tone shifting as she brings up a completely new topic. Dropping an absolute conversational bomb, out of nowhere his grandmother bluntly asks if he is still totally unable to get a girlfriend, leaving Haruto completely blindsided. Haruto practically chokes on his drink from the sudden aggressive call-out, awkwardly coughing and admitting that she is completely right about his single status. His grandmother just gives a quiet, slightly disappointed response. Not letting it go, she points out that dating is basically a standard part of being a high school sophomore. Desperately trying to defend himself, Haruto frantically insists that the vast majority of guys at his school are completely single too, claiming it is just the current trend, though his grandmother remains highly skeptical of his weak excuse. Haruto confidently tells his grandmother not to worry, declaring with absolute certainty that someday, soon, he will officially introduce her to an exceptionally gorgeous girlfriend. He lets out a massive, exhausted sigh as he walks down the street, instantly feeling the heavy pressure of the bold promise he just made. Reflecting on the whole girlfriend topic, Haruto rationalizes his grandmother's constant nagging. He realizes that given her advanced age and what the future might hold, it is only natural for her to worry so much about the well-being of her grandson. He worries about how her lower back condition is worsening, thinking that bringing home a girlfriend would truly set her mind at ease and make her happy. However, his incredibly packed schedule of studying, his housekeeping part-time job, and karate training leaves him with absolutely zero free time to actually date anyone. When Ayaka's beautiful face suddenly flashes in his mind, Haruto instantly panics and frantically shakes his head. He scolds himself for even letting his thoughts drift there, reasoning that there is absolutely no realistic way a flawless school idol like Tojo-san would ever fall for an ordinary guy like him. Arriving outside his karate training hall, Haruto decides to put his complicated thoughts aside for the moment and focus on his physical training. Meanwhile, the story pauses on Ayaka, who has been completely spaced out all morning, leaving everyone to wonder what on earth could be occupying the mind of the school's prettiest girl. Inside the training hall, the atmosphere is highly focused and disciplined as the other students begin preparing for their rigorous morning practice session. Haruto officially steps onto the mat and delivers a booming, respectful greeting to everyone present to kick off the morning workout. His instructor welcomes him back, dryly noting that Haruto finally decided to show his face around the training hall today. At the karate dojo, Haruto is greeted by Kazu-senpai, a highly intimidating senior whose fierce reputation and overwhelming aura usually scare away any potential sparring partners, leaving him bored and desperate for a training buddy. Haruto playfully teases his senior, pointing out that everyone avoids him because the name Ishiguro Kazuaki is notoriously feared throughout the town, prompting an outraged Kazuaki to jokingly rough him up while warning him not to ruin his good name. To Haruto, Kazu-senpai is like an older brother who is just 1 year his senior, and since both of them serve as assistant instructors in the dojo and are equally matched, they frequently train together to push each other's limits. Despite Kazuaki's scary facial scars, which were actually just the result of a tragic cat attack, his biggest insecurity is that his fierce looks always make kids cry hysterically. Despite his love for them, though, their heart-to-heart session is suddenly interrupted by a flat voice demanding they stop flirting at the entrance. The newcomer, Shizuku, bluntly calls their bromance annoying, prompting a grinning Kazuaki to tease her by asking if she is just jealous that he got so close to her beloved Haru-senpai. Shizuku responds with an incredibly sharp, icy stare that immediately speaks volumes and completely cuts off his teasing. Laughing off the intense silent treatment, Kazuaki comments on how terrifying she is, praising her for possessing the dignified presence expected from the only daughter of the Daojima dojo. Shizuku flatly rejects the compliment, complaining that being called dignified sounds way too old school for a youthful, enthusiastic high school girl like her who is brimming with modern energy. Haruto's sweat drops over her self-proclaimed youthful image, silently reflecting on how Shizuku is the dojo master's daughter and a junior at their school who regularly trains alongside them. Despite her sharp tongue and tough martial arts background, she is actually incredibly popular, ranking as the second most sought-after girl at school right after Ayaka herself. Shizuku confidently puts Haru on the spot, demanding to know exactly how he would describe her self-proclaimed flawless beauty. Haru awkwardly sweats at the bold question, bluntly pointing out that calling herself flawlessly beautiful is honestly a little bit full of herself. Taking a moment to actually think it over, Haru notes that Shizuka's specific brand of cuteness gives off a much more traditional Japanese-style vibe. He drops the ultimate compliment, casually comparing her to a Yamato Neidshiko, the absolute personification of the ideal traditional Japanese woman, which leaves Shizuku blinking in total surprise. Recovering from the shock, Shizuku playfully goes on the offensive, teasingly asking if he is trying to seduce her, and acting all high and mighty by declaring she will give him a chance, and he should be grateful. Haru immediately deadpans, begging her to stop making such wild, romantic jokes, while keeping a completely emotionless face. Refusing to drop the bit, Shizuku strikes a provocative pose, and teasingly asks if she is successfully arousing his feelings or mesmerizing him, prompting an exasperated Haru to loudly question where her actual emotions are. Shizuku abruptly pivots the conversation to check if it is almost time for practice, while their older dojo buddy bursts into loud laughter at Haru's exasperated expression. Taking it all in, Haru quietly reflects on how having these two childhood friends around makes the Daojima dojo feel exactly like a second home to him. The clock steadily ticks forward as the morning flies by, signaling the end of another grueling practice session. Ready to head out, Haru tells everyone good job for the day. Shizuku is completely surprised to see him leaving the dojo so early, and Haru awkwardly stammers as he prepares to explain his tight schedule. Haruto clarifies that he actually has to rush off to his new part-time job. Before he can escape, their older dojo buddy suddenly intercepts both him and Shizuku, asking if he can pull them aside for a quick favor, leaving Haruto completely curious about the unexpected request. Haruto playfully asks Shizuku which nation she plans on destroying this time, but she completely ignores the joke to bluntly reject a nearby suitor, stating she is already entirely devoted to Haruto. The rejected guy just groans and curses them both in defeat. Brushing off the harsh rejection, the older guy sighs and hands over a small box, telling Haruto and Shizuku to just eat whatever is inside. Haruto accepts the gift and curiously asks what he just gave them. Opening the lid, Haruto is pleasantly surprised to find a batch of beautiful glossy fruit tarts inside and politely double-checks if they are really allowed to eat such a fancy treat. Shizuku takes a massive bite while proudly declaring that she is absolutely not the type of girl to be won over by food. The older guy immediately yells at her for already stuffing her face and teases her for being ridiculously simple-minded. Eager for more feedback, the older guy urges Haruto to take a bite as well. Haruto happily obliges and pops a tart into his mouth, while Shizuku continues happily munching away in the background. Haruto's eyes go wide as he realizes the tart is absurdly delicious, immediately asking which high-end shop it came from. The older guy awkwardly rubs his neck and admits that he actually baked them himself, leaving Haruto completely stunned, while Shizuku practically spits out her food in sheer disbelief. Haruto passionately praises the baking skills, noting that while he knew his senior liked making desserts, these tarts are totally on a professional level and deserve to be sold in an actual store. The glowing compliment leaves the older guy blushing and completely flustered. Shizuku chimes in to agree that he could definitely open his own bakery, bluntly suggesting he name the cute shop something ridiculously intimidating. Her terrible naming sense instantly annoys the senior, who responds by challenging her to an immediate sparring match. Not wanting to deal with the fight, Shizuku suddenly claims she has to go home to help out and literally slides away at lightning speed. Her senior watches her run off and complains that her cute looks are a total waste on her personality, while Haruto just laughs and notes that is exactly what makes her Shizuku. Turning the focus back to the amazing food, Haruto officially addresses the older guy as Kazu-senpai and eagerly asks if he would mind teaching him how to make desserts next time. Kazu-senpai happily agrees to the baking lesson, enthusiastically declaring that he wants to try tackling cakes next. Haruto happily thinks about how thrilled little Ryuta is going to be when he gets to make sweets for him. Wrapping up his current plans, he announces that he needs to leave right away so he can head over to his new part-time job. His upperclassman Kazu-senpai casually remembers the new housekeeping gig and wishes him good luck on his shift. Haruto enthusiastically thanks him for the meal and says his goodbyes as he heads out the door. Haruto makes his way through the neighborhood and finally arrives in front of the massive, highly modern Tojo family mansion for his scheduled shift. Taking a deep breath to steady his racing heart, Haruto admits to himself that even though this is officially his third time working here, standing at their front door is still incredibly nerve-wracking. He quickly hypes himself up and hits the doorbell. Instead of a standard polite response, an incredibly eager voice instantly bursts through the intercom speaker, excitedly demanding to know if his favorite big brother is the one waiting outside. Ayaka immediately chimes in to scold her little brother over the intercom, reminding him to properly ask who is there, just in case it is a stranger. Taking her advice totally literally, Ryuta hilariously asks who his big brother is, prompting a deeply exasperated Ayaka to apologize to a highly amused Haruto for the sheer chaos. The front door swings open to reveal a brightly smiling Ayaka and a wildly cheering Ryuta, who both warmly welcome him inside. Haruto politely returns the greeting, wishing them both a good afternoon as he steps into the house. Leading the way down the hall, an absolutely ecstatic Ryuta brings up the new fixed-term contract, eagerly asking Haruto if this officially means he gets to come over and hang out with them all the time from now on. Haruto explains to Ryuta that while their arrangement is not forever, they can hang out for the rest of the summer break, sending the little guy into an ecstatic celebration as he runs off to tell his mom the great news. Ikkyu warmly welcomes Haruto and thanks him for coming over, prompting the polite housekeeper to express his gratitude for officially hiring him on a fixed-term contract. Watching the exchange, Ikkyu playfully teases her daughter Ayaka for still acting so incredibly reserved around her classmate. When her mother puts her on the spot to agree, a flustered Ayaka awkwardly stammers out that letting down her guard would probably make things feel a lot more comfortable for both of them. Haruto politely promises to do his absolute best with his duties, though he internally reminds himself that he is still dealing with the school idol and needs to stay grounded. Knowing how much the entire family already likes him, Haruto resolves to be extra careful with his behavior, so he does not accidentally send any mixed signals that could easily be misunderstood. Ikkyu shifts the focus to the day's official task, asking Haruto to help organize their outdoor storage room and offering to show him the way. Opening up the doors, they find themselves staring at an outdoor shed that is absolutely packed to the brim with boxes and household clutter. Ikkyu sheepishly explains that the space got completely cluttered with unused items before they knew it, admitting she originally asked her husband to handle it, but he has been far too busy with work. When Haruto asks how she would like him to organize everything, Ikkyu suggests pulling all the items out onto the yard first, so he can easily sort through them. Haruto confidently confirms that he fully understands the task, earning a cheerful sign-off from Ikkyu as he pumps himself up to get straight to work. Haruto hypes himself up as he officially opens up the backyard storage shed, fully determined to tackle his next big housekeeping task of clearing out all the clutter. As he begins sorting through the dusty shelves, he carefully catalogs the various old household items and appliances stored away. Haruto successfully pulls out several old, worn-out appliances, finding it quite surprising that a wealthy family like this would keep so many old, outdated things tucked away. He reflects on how down-to-earth her parents are, despite being successful corporate chairs, noting that this lack of arrogance applies completely to Ayaka too, as he never would have guessed she was a wealthy young lady based on her modest behavior at school. He is highly amused by a sudden hilarious mental fantasy of how absurd it would be if Ayaka actually acted like a stereotypical snobbish rich girl, laughing dramatically with roses blooming around her. Laughing off the ridiculous mental image of his classmate, he refocuses on his cleaning duties for the day. His quiet thoughts are suddenly shattered when Ayaka calls out his name from behind, completely startling the young housekeeper. Apologizing for startling him, Ayaka gently advises him that he doesn't need to stress over clearing out the entire shed in a single afternoon, and suggests he only do half of the work today. While she urges him to take it easy, Haruto politely insists on finishing the entire job today, since he has already gone through the trouble of pulling everything out. Highly impressed by his solid work ethic, Ayaka praises his impressive strength and stamina, curiously asking if he does some muscle training, prompting a modest Haruto to admit that he regularly trains at a karate dojo. Ayaka brings up Haruto's karate practice, which he easily confirms, though he humbly brushes it off by assuming most boys are naturally into that kind of stuff. Ayaka casually questions his modest claim just before something hidden among the storage boxes completely grabs her attention. She spots her old unicycle tucked away in the corner, cheerfully recalling that her dad gave it to her for her birthday back in early grade school, and wondering aloud if she still knows how to ride it. Shooting Haruto a quick glance, she asks if he minds letting her test it out for a quick spin. Haruto warmly gives her the go-ahead, and Ayaka enthusiastically hops onto the unicycle to give it a shot. She instantly starts wobbling all over the place as she tries to steady herself, nervously asking if riding the tricky contraption always felt this difficult. Watching her wildly flail around, Haruto checks in with a smile, playfully making sure she isn't about to totally faceplant. Ayaka immediately pouts and accuses him of totally mocking her lack of balance, though Haruto laughs it off and insists he meant no harm. Finally finding her center of gravity, Ayaka smooths out her balance and proudly reminds him that she used to be an expert at this, earning genuine praise from the impressed housekeeper. Fully back in her element, Ayaka successfully pedals forward with a confident, victorious hum. Just as things seem peaceful, Haruto suddenly shouts a frantic warning to Ayaka when her foot slips while riding a unicycle. Unable to recover her balance, she lets out a panicked cry as she starts to tilt sideways. The struggle is short-lived, ending in a dramatic and noisy crash on the pavement. Haruto immediately checks on her to see if she is doing all right, to which she quietly stammers a hesitant confirmation that she is fine. Peering up with wide eyes, she softly offers her gratitude to her kind classmate. The true gravity of the situation settles in as Ayaka realizes that Haruto successfully caught her mid-fall, leaving the two classmates locked in an incredibly close, heart-racing embrace. Looking extremely worried, Haruto asks once more if she is truly okay and gently presses to find out if she sustained any injuries. Blushing furiously from the intense physical proximity, she quickly insists she is totally fine. But her embarrassment instantly peaks when they both realize the highly awkward position they have landed in. Realizing his hands were a bit too close for comfort, Haruto immediately panics and loudly takes the blame for the clumsy landing. With his face completely flushed, Haruto stammers out a frantic apology for holding her so tightly, but a deeply embarrassed Ayaka quickly waves off his worries and points out that she would have been seriously injured if he had not stepped in to save her. Leaving both of them with completely red faces and racing hearts, they exchange shy thank yous and awkward welcomes, making the romantic tension between the two classmates soar to a whole new level. After an incredibly close and completely unexpected physical encounter, both Haruto and Ayaka sit as far apart as possible inside the cramped space, both blushing furiously and awkwardly agreeing in unison, as they try to process the intense embarrassment of their sudden skinship. Stuck together inside the small backyard storage shed, the two high schoolers find themselves trapped in a heavy, suffocating silence, surrounded by boxes and cleaning equipment, with absolutely no escape from the awkwardness. The stifling proximity makes them both hyper-aware of each other's presence, leaving Haruto completely flustered, and a deeply blushing Ayaka nervously fidgeting as they struggle to handle the sheer tension of the moment. Haruto quickly jumps back and tightly clenches his trembling fists, abruptly changing the subject to break the heavy, awkward tension between them. Ayaka refuses to look back at him, stammering out that she only came by to deliver her mother's encouraging message for him to keep up the good work, before she nervously grabs the door handle to escape. Left completely alone, Haruto stands frozen in absolute silence, a heavy blush covering his face, as he tries to process the wildly embarrassing encounter. His mind immediately flashes back to the close contact, and he accidentally mutters out loud about how incredibly soft her body felt when he caught her. He instantly panics and scolds himself for doing something so bold to the school idol, even if it was a total accident, before completely freaking out over his own creepy mumbling. Slumping his shoulders with a massive sigh, Haruto desperately wonders how to handle the situation, secretly praying that Ayaka isn't actually furious with him. Meanwhile, right on the other side of the door, Ayaka completely freaks out, totally bewildered as to why her heart is suddenly racing out of control. She frantically tries to rationalize the intense reaction, desperately convincing herself that her pounding chest is purely just leftover shock from losing her balance, and almost taking a nasty fall. Her internal panic is interrupted when her mother calls out from down the hall checking if she successfully passed the message along to Haruto, which Ayaka quickly confirms. Taking a deep, deliberate breath to compose herself, Ayaka forcefully exhales her lingering nerves and hypes herself up to head back inside like absolutely nothing happened. Ayaka slips back inside and quietly shuts the door behind her, desperately trying to keep her cool and act normal, despite her heart still beating wildly from the chaotic encounter in the shed. Her mother welcomes her back and casually asks what Haruto said about the chore, prompting a nervous Ayaka to report that he intends to finish organizing the entire storage room today, since it shouldn't take him too long. Her mother playfully remarks on how incredibly strong young guys are, which leaves Ayaka silently reflecting on how quickly her mom has taken a liking to Haruto after just a couple of visits, especially since he handles all his chores so well. Ayaka marvels at how easily Haruto won her mother over, despite her mom being a tough company CEO who is usually highly critical of people, but her deep thoughts are suddenly cut short by a tiny voice calling for her attention. Ryuta eagerly asks if his favorite big brother is almost finished cleaning up outside, forcing a highly flustered Ayaka to awkwardly reassure him that Haruto should be wrapping things up very soon. Ryuta eagerly tells his mother that he wants to play with Haruto, and she cheerfully agrees that it might happen if he finishes up his work early, sending the little boy into pure joy as he grows more attached to their new housekeeper by the day. Ayaka completely understands why her little brother has taken such a liking to Haruto, fondly reflecting on his gentle demeanor and how lovely he is as a kind-hearted big brother figure, only to get so caught up in her warm thoughts that her mother has to call her name to snap her out of it. Her mother playfully points out that her face has suddenly turned bright red, immediately teasing her by asking if something exciting happened between her and Haruto while they were outside. Ayaka completely panics under her mother's sharp gaze, nervously stammering over her words as she desperately tries to hide her massive blush and find a way to dodge the highly suspicious question. Meanwhile, a highly flustered Haruto is left with his own racing thoughts, still trying to calm down after their incredibly close encounter in the shed, while completely unaware of the playful interrogation taking place inside the house. Ayaka blushes furiously in front of her family, and when her mother notices with quiet amusement, Ayaka frantically denies that anything happened, desperately blaming her bright red face on the intense heat outside. Desperate to escape the teasing scrutiny, Ayaka suddenly claims she has to run back to her room to finish her summer homework, while her mother giggles and wishes her good luck with her studies. Once safely behind her closed bedroom door, she collapses onto her bed and groans in deep embarrassment over her own reactions. Staring blankly ahead, she frantically wonders why her heart starts pounding so incredibly hard every single time she thinks about Atsuki-kun. She begins to panic over the sudden realization that she might actually be falling in love with him, immediately forcing herself to sit up and desperately trying to calm her racing thoughts. She tries to rationalize her feelings, arguing that she has only known him for a brief period, meaning her feelings would basically be love at first sight, and concludes that Saki and her mother's teasing comments are the real reason she is acting so self-conscious. After a quiet moment of serious self-reflection, she reluctantly admits to herself that Atsuki-kun genuinely does possess quite a few attractive qualities. She reflects on how comforting his quiet, gentle presence is, noting that he is exceptionally well-behaved and never tries to force his way into her personal space. She appreciates that he doesn't treat her like a superficial school idol, noting how remarkably kind and caring he is, to the point that her shy little brother became deeply attached to him in no time. Mentally cataloging his endless positive qualities, from his amazing cooking and spotless cleaning to his top-tier school grades, secret muscles, and the fact that both of her parents absolutely adore him, she feels a deep squeeze in her chest, fully realizing just how deep her feelings for him are growing. Ayaka is completely overwhelmed by her racing thoughts, immediately panicking and desperately trying to stop herself from dwelling on Haruto. She furiously commands her own mind to stop thinking about him, warning herself not to jump to hasty conclusions about her feelings. Trying to calm her racing heart, she admits to herself that Atsuki-kun is indeed incredibly charming, but insists she needs to analyze the situation calmly and carefully. She wrestles with the terrifying possibility of actually loving him, quickly dismissing it as impossible, since falling in love so suddenly would make her no better than the boys who confess to her without truly knowing her. Reasoning that she still knows very little about him, she decides her ideal path is to become friends first, gradually get to know him, and eventually let a natural romance develop between them over time. She suddenly snaps, completely mortified, that she is already mapping out a future where they become lovers, which sends her mind into a chaotic, dizzying spiral of confusion. Absolutely exhausted by her relentless overthinking, she wallows in her confusion, completely unable to make sense of her own chaotic emotions. Attempting to find some clarity, she tries to compare her current heart-fluttering confusion to what she has read about the actual feeling of falling in love. She recalls the dramatic scenes from her romance manga, where a character finally reaches the profound realization that they are falling in love. She remembers how the story described love as a feeling so intense that simply locking eyes with the person is enough to make a girl's heart beat uncontrollably. Back in her room, Ayaka is deeply engrossed in a romance manga, carefully studying the pages to try and figure out how love is actually supposed to work. She cheerfully declares that she found exactly what she was looking for, only to jump in surprise when her mother suddenly calls out her name through the door. Peeking inside, her mother explains that Ryuta is once again demanding to go grocery shopping with Haruto, and casually asks if Ayaka wouldn't mind tagging along to keep an eye on them. Hearing that she gets to spend more time with the handsome housekeeper, a slight blush creeps onto Ayaka's face as she eagerly accepts the request and promises to head down right away. Stepping out into the hallway, Ayaka finds Haruto and her little brother patiently waiting for her so they can finally head out on their shopping trip. She quickly apologizes for the delay, while Ryuta complains about her being too slow, leaving Haruto to silently breathe a massive sigh of relief that she isn't acting awkwardly about their previous interactions. With the group finally ready to go, they open the front door and announce their departure, stepping out into the neighborhood for another casual afternoon errand. Trailing closely behind Haruto, Ayaka balls her fist in determination and resolves to figure out her true feelings for him, planning to test out her manga's theory that she should feel a magical spark the next time their eyes lock. Her intense plotting is suddenly interrupted when Ryuta calls out to check on her, prompting a flustered Ayaka to apologize for lagging behind and quickly jog to catch up. The trio continues their peaceful walk down the street, with Haruto effortlessly carrying a thrilled Ryuta on his shoulders, while Ayaka follows quietly behind them, her mind still completely consumed by her confusing new crush. While heading back together, Haruto easily carries an energetic Ryuta, making the walk feel incredibly warm and lively. Ayaka breaks the comfortable silence by casually asking Utsuki-kun what he plans to prepare for tonight's dinner. When Haruto suggests making chilled Oden, a highly surprised Ayaka questions if Oden can even be eaten that way. Haruto reassures her with a gentle, confident smile, promising that it will be absolutely delicious and that she will definitely be satisfied with it. As she stares at his bright, warm expression, Ayaka's chest suddenly tightens with an incredibly loud heartbeat. Completely caught off guard by her sudden physical reaction, Ayaka panics and mentally begs herself to calm down. She frantically wonders if her racing heart means she actually has romantic feelings for Utsuki-kun. Desperately trying to deny it, she insists to herself that her excitement is strictly about eating the chilled Oden rather than looking at his handsome face. Letting out a relieved sigh, Ayaka is glad she didn't get the wrong idea, while Ryuta curiously asks what chilled means, and Haruto kindly explains that it just means cold. When Ryuta eagerly asks if the chilled Oden will have eggs, Haruto warmly confirms that he will include them, prompting a blushing Ayaka to quietly reflect on what a wonderful father Haruto would make in the future. Blushing deeply, Ayaka softly admits that she thinks Haruto will make a wonderful father someday in the future. Flustered by her own sudden vulnerability, Ayaka frantically denies making a weird face, but little Ryuta immediately calls her out, insisting from his perch on Haruto's shoulders that she totally was. Panic sets in as Ayaka touches her burning cheeks, suddenly hyper-aware of how incredibly flushed her expression must be. Desperately needing reassurance, she quickly turns to Haruto and frantically asks him to confirm that her face does not actually look weird at all. Haruto flashes a warm smile and casually explains that since she has such an incredibly pretty face to begin with, he honestly cannot even imagine what her weird face would look like, leaving Ayaka completely stunned by the smooth reply. Her mind immediately goes into overdrive as she frantically processes the devastatingly impactful compliment, recalling how he also casually called her cute just yesterday and wondering if he is naturally this dangerously spontaneous. Deciding she seriously needs to keep her guard up around him, Ayaka forces a nervous laugh and awkwardly changes the subject, loudly declaring how excited she is to eat the chilled Odin while Haruto just glances over in mild confusion. Ryuta suddenly starts giving his older sister an incredibly intense knowing stare. When a nervous Ayaka asks what he is looking at, the little boy just smirks and teasingly claims, "It is absolutely nothing." Seeing right through her little brother's act, Ayaka internally panics, horrified by the realization that even Ryuta managed to pick up on her highly suspicious and flustered behavior. As they approach the local grocery store, Ayaka desperately vows to calm her racing mind right this second, realizing that with her heart beating this fast, there is absolutely no way she can even look Haruto in the eye properly. Ryuta cheerfully announces their return home the second they step through the front door. Ayaka feels completely drained from the sheer embarrassment of earlier silently admitting to herself that her current state of mind is not good. She reflects on how she was far too shaken up to even look Haruto in the eye for the rest of their trip. Meanwhile, her mother warmly thanks Haruto for taking the kids grocery shopping again today, which he politely waves off as no trouble at all, prompting Ayaka to steal a quick glance at him. While Haruto is busy working in the kitchen, Ayaka resolves to pull herself together and tentatively approaches the counter, catching the young housekeeper's attention. Haruto turns to face her and kindly checks to see if there is something wrong. Ayaka stammers for a brief moment before happily explaining that she was actually hoping to lend him a hand with the dinner prep. Haruto declines with a warm smile, reassuring her that cooking is his job, so she does not need to worry, which leaves Ayaka in disappointed silence. Ayaka quietly asks if having her join him would actually be a bother, completely catching Haruto off guard, as he silently wonders if her eagerness simply means she is incredibly excited to eat the chilled Odin they bought. Haruto frantically reassures her that she wouldn't be a bother at all, quickly putting her at ease by asking if she can help him drain the excess oil from the fish cakes. With a bright, happy smile, Ayaka eagerly agrees, internally celebrating the fact that she is finally able to look at him and talk to him normally again as they start cooking together. Watching the ingredients cook in the kitchen, Ayaka quietly checks her chest, realizing that her heart is still beating a tiny bit faster than usual around her classmate. However, she notes that it is nowhere near the explosive racing sensation described in her romance manga, leading her to confidently conclude that she definitely has not fallen in love with Atsuki-kun just yet. Her quiet, introspective thoughts are suddenly cut short when her father, Shuichi, slides the kitchen door open and cheerfully announces his return home. Seeing the two teenagers standing side by side at the stove, her father is completely taken by the domestic sight and playfully jokes that they look exactly like a sweet newly-wed couple cooking dinner together. The unexpected tease completely catches Ayaka off guard, instantly sending her entire face into a blazing red blush of pure embarrassment. Desperate to hide her red face, Ayaka loudly scolds her father for saying such embarrassing things, while Shuichi playfully laughs it off and asks a highly flustered Haruto to help back him up on the joke. Ayaka awkwardly stammers that she only came to drop off her mother's message, before hastily putting down her unicycle, wishing Haruto luck with his work and turning to leave. Left completely alone, a deeply blushing Haruto stands in absolute silence, completely unable to find his words. His mind immediately wanders back to the close contact, and he can't help but recall how incredibly soft she felt when he caught her. He frantically shakes his head to clear those intrusive thoughts, desperately scolding himself for thinking such bold things about Tojo, and even if it was a total accident. Slumping his shoulders with a massive sigh, Haruto wonders what he should do, secretly praying that she isn't actually furious with him, completely unaware that Ayaka is still lingering right outside. Right on the other side of the door, Ayaka clutches her chest in utter shock, completely bewildered as to why her heart is suddenly beating so incredibly fast. She frantically tries to rationalize her racing heart, desperately convincing herself that her intense reaction is purely just leftover shock from her sudden fall, rather than any actual romantic feelings. Her internal panic is suddenly cut short when her mother calls out from down the hall to ask if she delivered the message to Atsuki-kun, prompting a startled Ayaka to quickly call back in confirmation. Taking a deep, deliberate breath to completely compose her shattered nerves, she hypes herself up and prepares to step back inside as if absolutely nothing happened. Stepping through the doorway, she puts on a brave face, fully determined to act completely natural around her classmate. Returning inside, Ayaka is warmly welcomed back by her mother, who immediately asks for an update on Haruto's progress. Ayaka explains that he promised it wouldn't take much longer, and that he plans to finish the entire cleaning job today, which her mother casually acknowledges. Her mother smiles and playfully notes that young boys really do have an impressive amount of stamina. Watching her, Ayaka silently reflects on how her mother has already taken a massive liking to Haruto, after only 2 brief meetings admitting that the young housekeeper genuinely handles his chores perfectly. Ayaka quietly thinks about how her mother successfully runs her own company and is supposed to have an incredibly sharp eye for accurately judging a person's true character. Her deep thoughts are interrupted when little Ryuta excitedly tugs on her hand, asking if his favorite big brother is done cleaning, yet prompting Ayaka to gently explain that it will probably take a little bit longer. Ryuta immediately turns to his mother and enthusiastically begs to play with Haruto, and she warmly agrees that they can hang out if he finishes his work early. Ayaka watches her little brother beam with pure joy, noting just how quickly he has totally opened up and grown attached to the new housekeeper. Ayaka completely understands the quick attachment, mentally praising Haruto's remarkably calm and gentle demeanor. She thinks about how much he acts like a genuinely kind older brother whenever he plays with Ryuta, secretly admitting to herself that she finds that specific trait incredibly charming until her mother's sudden voice abruptly snaps her back to reality. Her mother bluntly asks why her face is suddenly turning bright red, leaving Ayaka completely stunned. With a knowing smirk, her mother immediately presses the issue and teasingly asks if something happened between her and Atsuki-kun out in the yard. The direct question sends Ayaka into an absolute panic, as she totally freezes up, wildly repeating the question in her head while her face burns with intense embarrassment. Her racing mind instantly flashes back to the heart-stopping moment in the storage shed, when Haruto heroically caught her mid-fall, completely overwhelming her with the fresh memory of his gentle, close-up gaze. Blushing harder than ever, Ayaka dramatically whips around to hide her red face and frantically shouts out a total denial, though her highly amused mother clearly does not buy the terrible excuse for a single second. Ayaka frantically tries to distract herself by suddenly announcing she needs to get a ton of summer homework done today, and rushing off to her room, earning an amused little cheer of encouragement from her mom. Once safely back in her room, Ayaka immediately drops the homework act and lets out a heavy, embarrassed groan as her lingering feelings finally catch up to her. She completely panics, desperately wondering why her heart starts racing uncontrollably every single time her thoughts drift to Atsuki-kun. The terrifying realization suddenly hits her that she might actually have a huge crush on her classmate, but she quickly forces herself to snap out of it and demands that she calm down before she totally loses her mind. Desperately trying to rationalize her feelings, she argues with herself that it is way too soon for her to be falling for him like some cliché love at first sight, blaming her mom and friends for constantly teasing her and making her hyper-aware of his every move. Taking a moment to actually think about it, a blushing Ayaka quietly reflects on the situation and reluctantly admits to herself that Atsuki-kun actually does possess some incredibly charming qualities. She starts mentally listing off his best traits, noting how he is always so incredibly calm, well-mannered, and surprisingly respectful of her boundaries, instead of being overly pushy. Continuing her glowing mental review, she appreciates that he never judges her purely based on her popular school idol status, adding that he is genuinely caring, gentle, and has already completely won over her little brother. Her list of praises just keeps growing as she highlights his professional-level cooking and cleaning skills, the fact that her parents absolutely adore him, his top-tier grades, and finally, his surprisingly muscular build. Realizing she just mentally constructed the absolute perfect dream guy, Ayaka completely short-circuits, covering her brightly blushing face in pure shock, as the undeniable truth of her massive crush finally crashes down on her. Ayaka frantically tells herself to stop thinking about it, desperately panicking that it is not time for these kinds of feelings yet. Trying to compose herself, she tells herself she needs to think calmly and carefully, finally admitting to herself that she at least finds Atsuki-kun highly charming. She realizes the core problem is whether she actually likes Atsuki-kun, but she immediately rejects the idea, arguing that suddenly falling in love like this would make her no better than the guys who confess to her without knowing anything about her actual personality. She reflects that her ideal path is to become friends first and gradually fall in love after getting to know each other. But since she still knows absolutely nothing about him, she concludes they must start as friends before they can ever think about becoming lovers. She quickly recoils in embarrassment, frantically questioning why on earth She is already jumping ahead to thoughts of them becoming lovers, her mind turning completely dizzy as she tries to untangle her thoughts about him. She groans that her head has been spinning nonstop since earlier, and she has absolutely no clue what her own feelings actually are. Her chaotic thoughts are suddenly cut short when her eyes lock onto a book nearby. She notices an open romance manga reading a confession where a character suddenly realizes they have officially fallen in love. As she reads the line about one's heart pounding wildly just from making eye contact, Ayaka is completely mesmerized by how closely the manga mirrors her own real-life situation. Ayaka quietly whispers that this is exactly what is happening to her, only to be startled out of her deep thoughts when a voice suddenly calls out her name from behind the door. Ayaka is suddenly snapped back to reality when her mother calls out explaining that Ryuta wants to go grocery shopping with Atsuki-kun again, and asking if she would mind accompanying them today too, catching her completely by surprise. Shaking off her sudden shock, Ayaka quickly calls back to her mother, eagerly agreeing to tag along on the grocery run. Back in Haruto's everyday life, he is busy studying at his friend Kazuaki's desk. Kazuaki, who is casually playing guitar in the background, playfully warns him that studying too much might actually make him dumb. When Haruto suggests that his friend try hitting the books instead, Kazuaki aggressively rejects the idea to focus on practicing his guitar skills before casually checking in to ask how Haruto's housekeeping job has been going lately. Kazuaki cheekily presses for details, directly asking if anything romantic or exciting has managed to develop between Haruto and the beautiful Taoju-san since they started working together. Haruto falls completely silent in response, which only serves to make his highly curious senior look even more incredibly excited for some juicy gossip. Haruto nervously admits that he has visited her house several times since they signed the contract, quickly adding that it was strictly for work, which immediately sends Kazuaki into a wild state of absolute shock. Tomoya reacts in complete shock when he learns that Haruto is regularly visiting the Taoju household, loudly demanding confirmation. Haruto casually clarifies that it is because of his new fixed-term housekeeping contract, but Tomoya points out that since the entire family already likes him, he absolutely shouldn't miss this perfect golden opportunity to get closer to Taoju-san. Tomoya playfully suggests that if things keep going this smoothly, Haruto might even end up dating the school idol. Haruto completely rejects the wild idea without a second thought, giving it a flat and immediate refusal. When Tomoya asks how he can be so absolutely sure, Haruto explains that Taoju-san is not someone who easily falls in love with people, adding that she would have dated someone else long ago if that were true. Tomoya reminds him that his incredible cooking is a powerful weapon, recalling Ayaka's dramatic confession about not being able to live without his food, and teasingly suggests he might win her heart through her stomach. Tomoya passionately points out that they are talking about the school idol herself, but Haruto realistically counters that if he actually dated her and held her hand at school, he would be instantly beaten to a pulp by every boy in the building. Tomoya then curiously asks if that means Haruto would refuse to do anything even if Taoju-san herself was the one showing him affection. Haruto defends his stance by calmly stating that he simply wants to enjoy a peaceful drama-free high school life. An amused Tomoya immediately labels him a total coward, though Haruto just rolls his eyes and tells him to keep talking. Turning his focus back to his schoolwork, Haruto quietly reflects on his friend's words, letting his mind drift as he thinks about his classmate. Haruto silently admits to himself that Taoju-san is undeniably gorgeous, but he notes that she is actually surprisingly easy to talk to compared to her distant school idol persona. He thinks back to how she acts at home, admiring how she is a remarkably kind and caring older sister to her little brother Ryuta. Haruto's train of thought drifts back to the moment Ayaka looked at him with an incredibly soft, vulnerable expression, asking him if she would be a nuisance if she joined him. Blushing slightly at his own memories, Haruto is snapped out of his thoughts when Tomoya asks if he is scheduled to head over to her house again today. Haruto awkwardly confirms that he is going after he finishes some grocery shopping for himself, prompting Tomoya to dramatically cry out in sheer jealousy. Later that day, Haruto arrives at the local supermarket with his shopping basket in hand, immediately noting to himself that the store seems far more packed with customers than usual today. Haruto is at the supermarket and notices a limited-time sale event. He checks out the discounted beef belly slices and muses over the marked-down spices and condiments, completely surprised by what he sees next. He spots a bottle of sesame oil on sale for an absurdly low price of 78 yen. Knowing it usually costs way over 200 yen, even for the store brand, Haruto dramatically wonders if he has been transported to another world, before eagerly deciding to snatch one up immediately. He stares in absolute awe at the massive, fully stocked rows of the highly discounted sesame oil, ready to grab as much as he can carry. His excitement is instantly crushed when he reads the fine print on the sale sign, which clearly states that the ridiculously cheap item is strictly limited to one per customer. Frustrated by the purchase limit, Haruto curses his luck, but quickly figures out a workaround, immediately pulling out his smartphone to rapidly tap away and call in some backup. He calls his buddy Tomoya, who casually answers the phone, and asks if Haruto accidentally left something behind at his place. Haruto frantically begs Tomoya to rush over to the supermarket right this second, prompting his friend to realize that it is one of Haruto's typical bargain hunting emergencies. Fully determined, Haruto vows not to let this incredible discount slip through his fingers today. Unfortunately, Tomoya apologizes and explains that he is currently heading to the studio for band practice and cannot make it. Disappointed but understanding, Haruto hangs up and immediately scrolls to his next contact to continue his desperate search for a shopping partner. He rings up Kazu-senpai next, but the tough guy is right in the middle of baking a cake and cannot step away from the kitchen. Haruto quickly apologizes for interrupting his baking session, realizing with a heavy sigh that he only has one viable contact left to call. With no other options, Haruto desperately calls Shizuku, begging for her help and promising to give her a proper reward if she cooperates. Shizuku instantly takes the offer in a highly suggestive direction, playfully calling him lewd while teasingly asking for a kiss, or something even more intense, which prompts a completely deadpan Haruto to question what on earth she is talking about. On a phone call, Shizuku apologizes to Haruto and explains that her mother just ordered her to weed the lawn right now, which Haruto understandingly accepts, wishing her luck with the chores, before she signs off with a playful, affectionate tease. Sighing in exhaustion, Haruto accepts that he has no choice but to follow his grandmother's exact shopping instructions, deciding to grab some sesame oil. He plans to quickly purchase some miso next before finally heading back home. However, his quiet shopping trip is suddenly cut short when a familiar voice calls out his name from behind. It turns out Ayaka has also just arrived at the supermarket, going over her mother's request for some wasabi as she begins her errand. She suddenly pauses in her tracks, catching sight of someone completely unexpected just ahead of her. Looking around the store, she reflects on how incredibly often she has ended up coming to this exact place lately. She fondly recalls shopping there with Haruto and her little brother, happily realizing that she gets to see him again later today, before she suddenly gasps in embarrassment at her own daydreaming. Letting out a heavy sigh, she frantically warns herself that falling in love with Atsuki-kun just yet is a terrible idea, quickly trying to distract herself by searching for the wasabi. Her focus is instantly shattered when she turns the aisle and lets out a panicked shriek upon running directly into Haruto. While out running errands, Ayaka spots Haruto in the supermarket and immediately tries to stay out of his line of sight to observe him. She is completely shocked by the coincidence, finding it hard to believe that she has run into her classmate outside of his working hours. Confirming it is definitely him, her anxiety spikes as she realizes she is completely unprepared for this random encounter, desperately debating whether she should go over and talk to him. She tries to convince herself that ignoring him would look incredibly awkward, but immediately starts overthinking, worrying that since he is off duty, he might find her annoying for acting too familiar. Noticing how serious he looks while focusing on his chores, she finds his focused attitude quite endearing, realizing that getting to see these casual, unseen sides of him brings her a lot of happiness. However, her cheerful mood quickly shifts to concern when Haruto suddenly stops and lets out a soft sigh, leaving her with the distinct impression that he seems quite sad. Feeling a sudden wave of worry, she can't help but wonder what could have happened to put him in such a downcast mood. Suspecting that he might be dealing with some serious trouble, she decides to cast her lingering awkwardness aside and finally moves forward to check on him. She tentatively calls out his name from behind, instantly catching him completely off guard. Haruto turns around in utter shock, his eyes widening in pure disbelief at the sight of his classmate standing right there in front of him. While shopping at the local supermarket, Ayaka is suddenly startled when a smiling Haruto spots her and happily calls out her name. Ayaka's overactive imagination immediately runs wild, picturing a dramatic scenario where Haruto treats her like a literal goddess, causing her to lose all composure and let out an incredibly bizarre shriek right in the middle of the store. After officially starting his new housekeeping part-time job and becoming a household favorite, Haruto's unexpected run-in with his popular classmate at the supermarket catches them both completely off guard. Completely mortified by her own wild imagination, a bright red Ayaka can't help but let out a bizarre high-pitched scream that echoes through the grocery aisles. Ayaka instantly panics in absolute embarrassment over her weird outburst, desperately wondering what on earth is wrong with her, as she frantically tries to figure out what it actually means to be a goddess in Haruto's eyes. Before she can recover her senses, Haruto steps closer and announces that he has a big favor to ask her, sending Ayaka's heart into a complete frenzy as she nervously stammers out a response. As Haruto stares intensely at her with a remarkably serious expression, Ayaka begins to panic as she realizes the overwhelming weight of the tense atmosphere surrounding them. With her mind completely spinning, Ayaka wildly jumps to the conclusion that Haruto is about to confess his love to her, internally screaming over how ridiculously fast and completely out of the blue this sudden romantic development is. Ayaka is absolutely convinced that Utsuki-kun is about to confess his feelings to her because of his serious and intense expression. She frantically resolves that if he actually confesses, she must immediately reject him, strongly believing they should start out as friends first. She desperately gathers all her courage, mentally commanding herself to stay brave so she can successfully deliver the rejection. The tense buildup instantly shatters when Haruto simply asks if she can help him buy some sesame oil. Caught completely off guard, a highly flustered Ayaka yells out a loud agreement and accidentally blurts out that she looks forward to being with him. Haruto is pleasantly surprised by her overwhelming enthusiasm, asking if she truly wants to help him out that much. Ayaka is completely mortified by her own tongue-tied slip-up, mentally screaming at herself for being such a fool when she had literally just decided to reject him a second ago. She pauses and tries to analyze the request to buy sesame oil together, suddenly wondering if this shopping trip counts as their very first collaborative task as a married couple. Ayaka's wild imagination goes into overdrive, hilariously convincing herself that this is some sort of sesame oily marriage proposal, while a completely oblivious Haruto warmly thanks her and explains that the special sale limits 1 bottle per customer, which had left him in a tough spot. Staring blankly at the store notice confirming the purchase limit, a highly embarrassed Ayaka quickly tries to laugh off her ridiculous misunderstanding, nervously assuring herself that she knew it wasn't a proposal all along. Regaining her composure, she checks to confirm that she simply needs to purchase the extra bottle for him, and Haruto happily agrees, promising to reimburse her for it once they check out. Once they walk away, Ayaka's face burns with absolute embarrassment as she mentally beats herself up for her incredibly foolish imagination and her completely ridiculous thoughts of a marriage proposal. While shopping, Haruto helps Ayaka find sesame oil and hands it to her. Ayaka is incredibly grateful and thanks him for helping her so much. Haruto passionately praises the miracle bargain price of 78 yen for the sesame oil, jokingly attributing it to the blessing of the god of sesame oil. Ayaka is highly amused by his silly joke, laughing softly and noting that he is surprisingly witty. Haruto sheepishly apologizes, admitting he simply got a bit too excited over the amazing bargain. His adorable, genuine smile instantly strikes a chord with Ayaka, causing her heart to skip a beat. Changing the subject, Haruto asks if she really came all the way to the store just to buy wasabi, noting that if she had told him earlier, he could have easily grabbed it for her during his shift. Ayaka explains that her father specifically asked her to handle the minor errand, so Haruto could focus entirely on cooking tonight's dinner. She reveals that her father is planning to bring home some fresh fish he caught today specifically for Haruto to prepare, which leaves the housekeeper slightly surprised. Haruto confirms he is perfectly comfortable with cooking fish and asks what kind of catch they will be dealing with. Ayaka pulls out her phone to check her father's message identifying yellowtail and sea bream, but runs into trouble trying to read a tricky kanji character. Haruto leans in to look at the screen and easily translates the character as Spanish mackerel, explaining the combination of kanji characters to her. Highly impressed by his intelligence, Ayaka warmly praises him for being so incredibly knowledgeable. Lost in thought about the menu, Haruto leans in remarkably close to look at her phone, leaving a completely frozen Ayaka blushing furiously, as she panics over how close his face is to hers. Realizing that Haruto is completely oblivious to the physical proximity, Ayaka's mind descends into complete chaos as she frantically panics over how she should react. She hesitates to pull back, worrying that backing away might make her look embarrassingly self-conscious. Instead, she quietly steals a glance at him, wondering if he is truly unfazed by the close distance, or if he is just keeping his cool. Haruto suddenly finds himself way closer to Ayaka than he ever anticipated, leaving him absolutely flustered, as he panics internally, desperately trying to figure out how to escape the incredibly close and awkward situation without making things even weirder. He reminds himself that he is definitely not her boyfriend, but the extreme proximity is making him lose his mind, especially when he accidentally notices how nice she smells. He immediately scolds himself for having such inappropriate thoughts, resolving to casually slide away, so he does not look incredibly self-conscious. Finally putting some distance between them, Haruto desperately scrambles to break the heavy tension by abruptly changing the subject, awkwardly asking Ayaka if they happen to have a gas stove at her house. A completely bewildered Ayaka admits she has absolutely no idea if they have one, prompting Haruto to explain that Spanish mackerel is best served grilled. He mentions that there is a home improvement center right next door, so he plans to quickly head over there to buy a portable gas stove. Without even thinking, Ayaka immediately asks if she can tag along with him, completely catching both of them off guard. Ayaka internally panics over her impulsive reflex, but quickly covers it up by claiming she has just never been inside a home improvement store before. Haruto finds it totally reasonable, quietly thinking that a popular girl like Taoju-san would indeed have absolutely no reason to visit a home center. With a warm and friendly smile, Haruto happily accepts her company and casually invites her to head over to the store together. Ayaka happily agrees, but as they set off, she secretly admits to herself that she honestly just wants to spend a little more time by his side. As she trails behind him, Ayaka suddenly gasps as a sudden memory hits her, sending her mind racing over how she would have reacted if Haruto had actually been confessing his love to her earlier. With her heart beating wildly, she realizes she would have completely and naturally accepted his confession, forcing her to finally confront the undeniable truth about her growing romantic feelings for him. Blushing slightly, Ayaka quietly watches Haruto, letting a comfortable silence hang between them. Haruto suddenly notices her silence and checks in to see what happened, instantly snapping a highly startled Ayaka right out of her deep thoughts. Desperately needing a distraction to cover her embarrassment, Ayaka nervously points out how incredibly cute Haruto's reusable shopping bag is, prompting him to ask if she means the one he is currently holding. Haruto explains that his grandmother is the one who usually uses the cute bear bag, and that he actually quite likes it himself, to which Ayaka warmly remarks that his grandmother sounds absolutely adorable, earning a very cheerful thank you from her classmate. Moving along to the massive home center, next Ayaka is absolutely amazed by the sheer volume of goods on display, while Haruto agrees that the store's incredible product lineup has pretty much everything they could possibly need. As they stroll down the aisles, something exciting suddenly catches Ayaka's eye, causing her to gasp in surprise. Spied among the massive aisles, a brightly lit pet section grabs her full attention, and she excitedly suggests they go check it out for a quick look. Ayaka eagerly checks to see if it is truly okay for them to go, which Haruto warmly agrees to without a second thought. Cheering with pure childlike excitement, Ayaka eagerly runs ahead towards the dog and cat section, while a highly amused Haruto follows closely behind her. The second they step inside, Ayaka is completely captivated by an incredibly fluffy little puppy, loudly squealing over how absolutely adorable it is. Stopping by a pet shop display, Ayaka completely melts over a tiny fluffy puppy that eagerly waddles right up to the glass to greet her. Beaming with absolute joy, she marvels at the adorable dog, brightly telling Haruto that she had no idea Pomeranian puppies were actually this incredibly small. Completely overwhelmed by the adorable sight, Ayaka practically squeals about the cuteness overload, while Haruto quietly watches her with a soft, affectionate blush. Ayaka excitedly points out the puppy's tiny paws pressing against the glass, completely oblivious to the fact that a highly flustered Haruto is totally distracted by how ridiculously cute she looks playing with the dog. As they continue walking through the store aisles, Haruto awkwardly notes how much she clearly loves dogs, prompting a happily smiling Ayaka to claim that it is almost impossible for anyone to hate such adorable little creatures. Haruto casually mentions that taking a trip to a petting zoo with her sounds like it would be a ton of fun, instantly making Ayaka light up with excitement, as she enthusiastically agrees that she really wants to go too. Haruto suddenly freezes in pure terror, as his own words catch up to him, panicking over the massive realization that his casual comment completely sounded like a smooth, direct invitation to take her out on a romantic petting zoo date. The exact same realization hits Ayaka a split second later, causing her to freeze up with a heavy, deeply flustered blush, as the romantic weight of his accidental invitation finally registers. Desperate to fix the incredibly tense atmosphere, a thoroughly embarrassed Haruto immediately scrambles to backtrack on his bold words and clear up the massive misunderstanding. Ayaka frantically jumps in to save them both from the crushing awkwardness, loudly suggesting that they could take little Ryuta to the zoo, since he loves it so much, an incredibly safe excuse that Haruto instantly and eagerly latches onto. Ayaka nervously explains that since their parents are always too busy with work to take them, she would feel a bit unsafe taking Ryuta to the zoo by herself, shyly adding that Ryuta would be absolutely thrilled if Haruto came along too. Haruto warmly nods in agreement, finally realizing just how much Ryuta truly loves the zoo. Terrified of sounding like she is inviting him on a date, Ayaka frantically stammers that she only meant it for her little brother's sake. Completely flustered, Ayaka trails off as she tries to hide her mounting embarrassment under a very shaky smile. Haruto watches her with a soft, understanding gaze, his own cheeks flushing slightly at her adorable nervousness. Haruto smoothly suggests that the three of them should just go to the zoo together next time, which catches Ayaka completely by surprise and leaves her stammering out a happy agreement. After a brief loaded silence between them, a blushing Ayaka suddenly remembers their actual shopping errand, loudly declaring they need to go buy the gas stove now, which a highly relieved Haruto quickly agrees with. With their embarrassing conversation finally behind them, the two classmates set off down the grocery aisles side by side. After successfully finishing their shopping, they step out into the bright parking lot together, though the quiet distance between them is still thick with unresolved tension. Standing side by side, both Haruto and Ayaka steal quiet, hesitant glances at one another, completely unsure of how to break the lingering silence between them. Haruto tentatively notes that he will be coming over to her house again later, which she nervously confirms before he hesitantly shifts the topic to their upcoming zoo trip. Haruto suggests they discuss the official schedule and other details for the trip a bit later, on which Ayaka warmly agrees to. With their shopping finished, Haruto bids her farewell for now and promises to see her later, while a smiling Ayaka tells him to take care until they meet up again at her house. They officially part ways, heading off in opposite directions after their highly eventful grocery run. Feeling a slight blush creeping onto his face, Haruto cannot help but look back one last time as they walk away. Ayaka immediately notices his gaze and offers her own incredibly warm, blushing farewell in return. He continues to watch her go, completely captivated as she disappears down the street. Deeply flustered, Haruto frantically wonders if he just accidentally crossed a professional boundary. He desperately questions if he just promised Taoju-san an actual date, quickly reassuring himself that Ryuta will be there to keep him from getting any foolish ideas. His friend's earlier warning about what he would do if Taoju-san actually showed him affection suddenly echoes in his mind, leaving a completely stunned Haruto totally frozen. Haruto heads home after his supermarket errand, deciding to completely focus his mind on cooking a delicious fish dish for dinner today. Right after their grocery run, Haruto officially arrives at the Tojo household for his scheduled shift, where a highly delighted Ikkyu warmly welcomes him at the door, while little Ryota excitedly sprints down the hallway to greet him. Ryota immediately throws himself into his favorite big brother's arms, excitedly begging Haruto to come look, because the fish they got are looking absolutely amazing. Shuichi greets the young housekeeper with a highly welcoming attitude, happily noting how glad he is that Haruto has finally arrived. Shuichi explains that he already heard about their fishing trip from Ayaka, while a proud Ryota eagerly urges Haruto to take a look at their successful catch. Haruto is completely amazed as he peers inside the cooler box to find several massive, incredibly fresh fish resting on a bed of ice. Admiring the excellent fresh catch inside the cooler box, Haruto and Ryota listen as Shuichi proudly explains that one of his business partners invited him out boat fishing, before he goes off on a long, rambling story about the dramatic struggle it took to reel in the yellowtail. Shuichi's enthusiastic storytelling is smoothly cut short by his wife Ikkyu, who teasingly warns him that the fresh fish is going to completely lose its freshness if he doesn't stop talking and let them start cooking. Haruto warmly agrees that the high-quality fish deserves a fantastic preparation, politely asking Shuichi for his input on how he would prefer each catch cooked, just as the click of the front door signals Ayaka's arrival. Stepping into the room, Ayaka suddenly stops in her tracks as her eyes lock with Haruto's, instantly making both classmates blush and turn incredibly awkward as they remember their close encounter at the supermarket. Desperate to break the heavy silence, Ayaka stammers out a nervous welcome, while a highly flustered Haruto awkwardly apologizes for entering their home, both of them completely unable to hide their intense embarrassment. Noticing the ridiculously tense and awkward atmosphere between the teenagers, Ikkyu immediately homes in on them with a playful grin, curiously asking if something exciting happened between them. Desperately trying to dodge her mother's suspicion, Haruto and Ayaka quickly deliver synchronized, completely unconvincing denials, insisting that absolutely nothing out of the ordinary occurred between them. Refusing to let up on the teasing, Ikkyu cheekily informs her daughter that Utsuki-kun is about to cook a meal filled with love for their family, playfully asking Ayaka what she would like him to make and sending her daughter into absolute shock. When Ikkyu directly puts Haruto on the spot to back her up, the flustered housekeeper nervously agrees, politely promising that he will happily put his entire heart into preparing tonight's dinner. Ikkyu drops the ultimate romantic bombshell, teasingly translating his polite promise into a declaration that he is cooking with his whole heart, specifically just for Ayaka, leaving her daughter completely speechless and short-circuiting with embarrassment. Haruto nervously clarifies that his hard work is not just for Ayaka's sake but for the entire family. Her mother playfully swoons and praises him for being so incredibly lovely, prompting a deeply embarrassed Ayaka to loudly scold her mom for troubling the young housekeeper. Ayaka's dad casually mentions that fresh fish is usually best served as sashimi. Little Ryuta eagerly jumps at the idea and loudly begs his favorite big brother to make some for him, which prompts a smiling Haruto to happily offer to prepare the fish in 3 different sashimi styles. The dad excitedly adds to the menu, asking if it would be okay to also grill one of the fish and whip up a savory broth using the yellowtail's marrow. Haruto acknowledges the fantastic request and officially announces that he is getting right to work on preparing the evening's massive feast. Fully slipping into his professional housekeeper mode, Haruto expertly handles the massive fish, demonstrating incredible precision as he flawlessly slices and chops the fresh ingredients to prepare the elaborate dinner. Watching the flawless culinary display from the kitchen counter, Ayaka's dad is completely blown away by the incredible knife work. He highly praises the young high schooler for being so remarkably skillful, earning a modest and polite thank you from the focused cook. The impressive display inspires Ayaka's mother to playfully wonder aloud if she should ask Atsuki-kun to give her some personal fish cooking lessons. Haruto warmly agrees, offering to happily teach her anytime she wants, while Ayaka watches the friendly exchange from the sidelines. Her mother suddenly pivots and suggests Ayaka join the cooking lesson before mischievously changing her mind and declaring that if Ayaka marries a husband like Atsuki-kun, she wouldn't even need to learn how to cook. The sudden marriage joke sends Ayaka into an absolute panic, stammering wildly as she loudly demands to know why her mother is saying such heavily embarrassing things right in front of him. Her mother mischievously points out her daughter's massive overreaction, teasingly reminding Ayaka that she only said a husband like Atsuki-kun. Ignoring Ayaka's bright red flustered face, her mother just giggles and warmly asks Haruto to keep being friends with her daughter, even though she can be a bit of an airhead. Haruto completely takes the joke in stride, flashing a kind smile and warmly confirming that he is also really looking forward to staying good friends with Ayaka. Hearing his sweet reassurance, her massive panic finally settles, and she shyly steals a quick hopeful glance at him. The cheerful atmosphere suddenly gives way to a heavy, awkward silence as the true weight of the husband joke finally registers in Haruto's mind. His face erupts in a deep blush as he totally freezes up, while Ayaka's dad quietly observes the highly flustered teenager from across the counter. Ayaka's father, Shuichi, quietly processes the situation as his mind begins to drift in a completely unexpected direction. He contemplates that if his daughter actually married Utsuki-kun, it would officially make the young man his son-in-law, a realization that leaves him in deep, serious thought. Both Ayaka and Haruto freeze in absolute wide-eyed shock at the sudden and bizarre train of thought. Shuichi mutters that he isn't quite ready to let his beloved daughter get married just yet, prompting an incredibly embarrassed Ayaka to loudly scold her father for cooking up such weird scenarios all on his own. The situation only worsens when little Ryuta innocently looks up and directly asks Haruto if he is actually planning to marry his big sister, catching the poor housekeeper completely off guard and leaving him choking in shock. Ayaka immediately panics and demands that Ryuta stop talking frantically, pointing out that Utsuki-kun is currently holding a sharp cooking knife and pleading with him not to say distracting things that could cause an accident. Ryuta innocently argues that if she simply marries him, Haruto will finally become his official big brother, leaving Ayaka completely flustered, while Shuichi playfully attempts to declare a ban on marriage talk, and a blushing Ayaka frantically reminds everyone that they are still only high schoolers. Her mother Ikkyu chimes in with her own playful grin, teasingly asking if that means Ayaka plans on marrying him the second they graduate, which prompts a completely overwhelmed Ayaka to yell at her mother to please shut up. Later that night, back in her room, Ayaka collapses onto her bed in complete exhaustion, utterly drained by her family's relentless teasing. She laments that even though Utsuki-kun prepared an absolutely spectacular and delicious dinner for the family, the constant suffocating embarrassment left her completely unable to relax and enjoy a single bite of the meal. Ayaka lets out a heavy sigh of exhaustion before suddenly remembering the plan she made to visit the zoo with Haruto. She realizes that bringing up the zoo trip during dinner would have caused a massive scene, especially since her entire family has taken such a huge liking to Haruto, with her dad taking the marriage jokes way too seriously. She admits that her family's relentless teasing is not even the real issue, realizing that the most serious problem of all is the chaotic racing feeling in her own heart. She recalls the hilarious conversation from earlier, remembering how her little brother bluntly questioned if Haruto was actually going to marry her, and how her protective dad immediately chimed in to declare he wasn't ready to let his cute daughter get married just yet. Her heart skips a beat as she reluctantly admits to herself that even she has started seriously daydreaming about a future where they actually end up together. She thinks back to when an older student tried to propose to her in the past, and how she found the idea of a high school engagement completely insane, only to realize her entire perspective has changed now that Haruto is in the picture. She lies in absolute silence, deeply lost in thought, as she contemplates her next move. Finally making up her mind, she reaches out and places a call to her best friend Saki, who cheerfully picks up and asks what is going on. Ayaka hesitantly asks if they can talk for just a little bit, sending an excited Saki into immediate gossip mode, as she instantly guesses that Ayaka must be dealing with some serious love troubles. The highly accurate guess completely catches Ayaka off guard, leaving her totally stunned at how easily her best friend managed to read her mind. Safely back in her bedroom, Ayaka sits on her bed and makes a phone call to her friend, Saki, tentatively admitting that she might actually have a crush on someone. Saki reacts with such massive clumsy shock that she literally drops her phone with a loud thud, forcing a highly startled Ayaka to check if her best friend is actually doing all right. Saki loudly yells that she is definitely not okay, completely mind blown that the boy-hating school idol suddenly wants to talk about love and demanding to know who managed to steal her heart. Ayaka nervously tries to downplay the situation, stammering that she is certainly not completely head over heels for him just yet. Clutching her pillow tightly, Ayaka desperately begs her friend to just calm down and listen to her side of the story first. Ayaka softly confesses that she is desperately trying to make sense of these overwhelming new emotions, but simply cannot untangle them on her own, explaining that she really needs to have a sincere face-to-face talk with Saki. She looks down in quiet, vulnerable reflection, anxiously waiting for her best friend's response. Saki enthusiastically agrees, but immediately declares that a simple phone call is a total waste, insisting they must meet face-to-face, so she can dedicate all her time to helping Ayaka solve her love crisis, completely catching Ayaka off guard. Before Ayaka can even process the sudden change of plans, Saki quickly schedules their meeting for 11 the next morning at their usual cafe, cheerfully telling her not to sweat the details before wrapping up the call. Left staring at her screen after her friend abruptly hangs up, an absolutely exhausted Ayaka collapses flat onto her bed, with a heavy sigh, completely overwhelmed by her best friend's intense energy. Lying flat on her back, Ayaka stares blankly up at the ceiling, bracing herself for what will undoubtedly be a chaotic and intense interrogation tomorrow morning. Ayaka wonders if discussing her complicated situation with Saki might finally give her some much-needed clarity. The next morning arrives with the sound of chirping birds, and a sluggish Ayaka drags herself up while complaining about still being incredibly sleepy. She laments that her relentless overthinking after last night's phone call left her with barely any proper sleep. Stepping into the living room, Ayaka greets her mother, who is surprised to see her awake so early, prompting Ayaka to explain that she has plans to meet up with Saki today. Noticing her mother is already on her way out, Ayaka asks if she is heading to work early, which Ikkyu confirms due to an early office commitment, before kindly asking her daughter if she wants some breakfast. Ayaka is completely blown away by the absolutely gorgeous and elaborate morning spread waiting for her on the table. She marvels at the incredible breakfast, noting that it genuinely feels like dining at a high-end, luxurious Japanese restaurant. Ikkyu proudly explains that after she mentioned her early schedule last night, Atsuki-kun immediately prepped the entire gourmet spread consisting of teimeshi Spanish mackerel seikayo uyaki and snapper broth soup, leaving an incredibly impressed Ayaka to whisper about how amazing he is. Offering a traditional pre-meal greeting of gratitude, Ayaka eagerly digs into the delicious fish. Ayaka is completely blown away by the incredible flavor, prompting her mother to tease her about looking so exceptionally happy eating Atsuki-kun's cooking, which instantly sends a flustered blush across her daughter's face. Ayaka's mother suddenly calls out her daughter's name with a gentle, knowing smile, prompting a highly suspicious and nervous Ayaka to cautiously ask what she wants. Sitting at the dining table, her mother casually drops some deep wisdom, explaining that youth is an incredibly short chapter in a person's life that vanishes before they even realize it. She notes that despite all the incoming happiness, struggles, and troubles, it remains a critically important phase of growing up. Leaning in, her mother warmly urges Ayaka to live in the moment as much as she possibly can right now, promising her that she will eventually look back on these youthful days as the absolute most precious asset of her entire life. Ayaka blushes heavily and complains that her mother is being totally unfair, internally panicking over how easily her mom seems to read her mind, while her mother just sits back and lets out a highly amused, knowing chuckle. The story shifts to highlight that having a dependable and good friend in your life is an absolute blessing. Ayaka sits completely alone at a table inside a local cafe, quietly staring at her phone as she anxiously waits for her companion to finally show up. The cafe clock steadily ticks forward, closing in on 11 o'clock, as Ayaka continues to pass the time alone. Her friend finally arrives with a cheerful greeting, playfully asking if she kept her waiting, which instantly prompts a highly exasperated Ayaka to loudly complain that she has been sitting there waiting for a ridiculously long time. Ayaka arrives at the cafe incredibly fast to meet her best friend Saki, who cheerfully orders their drinks before leaning in to finally get the juicy details of Ayaka's sudden call. Saki eagerly demands to know who Ayaka's beloved boy is, sending a flustered Ayaka into a mild panic, as she desperately tries to redirect the conversation by reminding Saki of a boy they had previously discussed, though Saki seems completely clueless. Saki insists that Ayaka was indeed the one who brought it up, reminding her that she claimed there was a boy who seemed to an incredible amount of natural chemistry with her. After a brief moment of puzzling over the word chemistry, Saki's eyes light up with sudden realization as she loudly guesses that the mystery boy is none other than Utsuki-kun, leaving a heavily blushing Ayaka completely exposed. When Ayaka shyly confirms the guess, Saki completely loses her mind, jumping up in absolute shock and loudly demanding to know how on earth such a dramatic development even managed to happen. Ayaka hesitantly prepares to tell her the whole truth, nervously stepping forward to explain how things actually unfolded between them. Saki squeals in absolute delight over the incredible story, calling their encounter pure destiny, before jokingly pointing out that Haruto's domestic skills and overall stats are way too unrealistically perfect for a high school guy. Ayaka appreciates the support, but emphasizes that she really needs to talk things through in detail, wanting to rely on Saki's advice, just as she had mentioned the day before. Ayaka openly confesses that she is completely unable to define her actual feelings toward Haruto, explaining that since Saki has had a boyfriend, before, she hoped her best friend could help her figure out whether this intense feeling is actually true love. Saki sympathetically nods, realizing that since Ayaka has actively avoided boys for years, she would naturally have absolutely no frame of reference for romance, which leaves Ayaka staring in silent anticipation as she waits for her friend's expert relationship advice. Saki is playfully teasing Ayaka, cooing over how cute she is and guessing that she barely got any sleep last night. A flustered Ayaka immediately protests, telling Saki to stop making fun of her. Saki jokingly apologizes for her playful teasing, trying to laugh off the reaction. Saki's expression quickly turns thoughtful as she quietly studies her friend's reaction. Saki wants to confirm one last thing, noting that Ayaka hasn't been able to get Utsuki-kun out of her head lately. Saki asks if she simply wants to figure out whether she is actually love-struck, to which Ayaka quietly agrees that she does. Hearing this, Saki prepares to offer a direct solution. Saki smiles broadly and boldly demands that Ayaka introduce her to Utsuki-kun. Ayaka stares back in complete wide-eyed bewilderment at the highly unexpected request. A panicked Ayaka stammers to ask why, desperately hoping Saki is just joking, but Saki insists she is completely serious and asks to come over to play next time Utsuki-kun visits. Ayaka immediately shuts the idea down, firmly telling Saki not to do it. She immediately freezes, completely startled by how fast and protective her own refusal was. Saki directly asks Ayaka if she can meet Atsuki-kun too, immediately catching her best friend completely off guard and leaving a sweating Ayaka stammering in nervous hesitation. Ayaka immediately feels a sharp sting of jealousy, realizing she wants to keep Haruto's soft, hardworking side entirely to herself, especially since her incredibly cute and outgoing best friend, Saki, can easily get close to any boy in no time. She anxiously imagines the two of them quickly hitting it off and becoming close friends, which makes her feel incredibly insecure about losing his exclusive attention. The terrifying thought of them getting close makes her squeeze her eyes shut as she struggles to handle the sudden wave of possessiveness. She mentally questions if her intense reaction simply means she is terrified of him being stolen away from her. The shocking realization hits her like a total truck, causing her to gasp out loud in sheer disbelief. Saki immediately calls her out, teasingly asking if she is actually worried about having Haruto's attention stolen away, which a flustered Ayaka reluctantly admits, before Saki gently presses her to understand why she feels so strongly about it. Ayaka tries to unpack her feelings, wondering if the core issue is that she simply cannot stand the thought of anyone else sharing the unique hardworking side of him that she has grown so fond of. She is forced to confront the ultimate question of whether she secretly wants to keep him entirely to herself, leaving her face burning with a deep, embarrassed blush, as she wonders why she has become so possessive. The answer becomes instantly clear to her, as Haruto's gentle, kind smile flashes in her mind, leaving absolutely no doubt about how much he truly means to her. Staring in quiet contemplation, Ayaka finally experiences a sudden moment of absolute clarity, realizing the true nature of her feelings. A heavily blushing Ayaka finally admits to herself that she has officially fallen in love with Utsuki-kun. Saki beams with absolute delight, playfully congratulating her friend for finally figuring out her true feelings and giving her a perfect score for her honesty. Despite her friend's enthusiastic confirmation, Ayaka still feels incredibly uncertain, nervously questioning if this overwhelming confusion is truly what love is supposed to feel like. Noticing her friend's lingering hesitation, Saki checks in to see if she is still unconvinced, prompting a quiet Ayaka to admit that she simply doesn't understand. Ayaka's anxiety flares up again as she frantically questions when she actually fell in love with Utsuki-kun and what specific parts of him she is even attracted to. She reasons that since they only had their first real interaction at the very start of summer break, it seems completely absurd that she could have fallen so deeply in love with him in such a ridiculously short amount of time. Ayaka passionately explains that in every romance manga she has read, the exact moment the heroine falls in love is always made incredibly obvious, often highlighted by a dramatic double-page spread. Saki gently interrupts her dramatic rant to point out that real-life romance operates completely differently from fictional stories and manga, though she adds that she isn't completely dismissing fictional logic either. Curiously digesting her friend's advice, Ayaka wonders if people in the real world are genuinely unaware of the exact moment they fall in love, only for Saki to calmly clarify that real life simply doesn't work that way. Saki points out that the clearest sign of falling in love is when your gaze is completely pinned on a specific person, and you find yourself thinking about them constantly. Ayaka hesitates, admitting that even if her feelings are real, she still has absolutely no idea what the original trigger was, which only prompts a giggling Saki to tease her. Saki finds it incredibly amusing that Ayaka can't see the obvious answer, playfully leaning in and suggesting she knows exactly how it all started. Saki explains that the ultimate trigger was the exact moment Ayaka booked a housekeeping service, and a remarkably high-spec, handsome classmate unexpectedly showed up at her door, calling it a dream-like setup. She adds that while real-life romance rarely mirrors fictional stories, Ayaka's current situation is so perfectly dramatic that the entire initial premise reads exactly like the title of a romantic comedy manga. The truth finally clicks for Ayaka, as she silently reflects on her situation, admitting to herself that her curiosity and interest in Atsuki-kun have been steadily growing from the very second he first arrived at her house. Recalling all of the sweet, warm, and comforting moments they have together, her heart swells with an undeniable wave of affection. With a soft, peaceful smile, she finally accepts her own feelings, quietly confirming to herself that her crush on him is entirely real. Blushing deeply, Ayaka warmly agrees that this is indeed the beautiful journey of how she officially fell in love with him. Pleased to see her friend finally coming to terms with her heart, Saki happily notes that Ayaka has finally fully understood her own feelings, bringing a comfortable, happy silence to their conversation. Now that Ayaka has fully accepted her feelings for Utsuki-kun, she meets up with her best friend at their usual spot to discuss her love life, admitting her realization that she is officially in love with him. The mere thought of taking the next step completely short-circuits Ayaka's brain, leaving her highly panicked with spiral eyes, as she frantically wonders if she should actually confess her feelings to him right away. Saki immediately tells her to hold her horses and not rush into anything, which catches the overly anxious Ayaka by surprise, as she realizes she might need to slow down. Saki takes on the role of a love guru, explaining that a romantic confession is essentially the final level of a video game, meaning Ayaka needs to successfully clear several smaller stages first, before she can even dream of reaching it. Getting dead serious, Saki reveals that the very first level Ayaka needs to conquer is simply finding a way to get much closer to her crush. Saki drops a massive bomb by declaring that the best way to clear this first level is by boldly asking him out on a date, sending a shocked Ayaka into a state of pure wide-eyed disbelief. Ayaka casually drops the bombshell that she actually promised to go to the zoo together, with Haruto sending her best friend Saki into a state of absolute rattling shock. Saki is completely mind-blown that Ayaka already managed to pull off a date, prompting a highly flustered Ayaka to frantically explain that it is not really a date since they are bringing Ryuta along with them. Saki points out that bringing Ryuta along means Atsuki-kun probably won't get the hint that it is supposed to be a romantic date, and when she checks if they have officially set a day, Ayaka admits they plan to schedule it later, giving Saki the perfect opportunity to cook up a new plan. Saki presents what she calls a secret romantic weapon, leaving a highly curious Ayaka to wonder what on earth she could be referring to. Saki confidently explains that Ayaka can easily use the items she just handed her to ask Atsuki-kun out on a real date. Ayaka is completely taken aback to discover that the secret weapon is actually just a pair of discounted cinema tickets. Saki excitedly instructs her to use their upcoming planning session as the perfect excuse to invite him to a movie, but a deeply worried Ayaka hesitates, feeling like asking him out to the theater is far too high of a bar for her. Saki passionately lectures her that love is exactly like a race, and she cannot stay frozen at the starting line forever, successfully convincing Ayaka to build up her courage and accept the challenge. With the goal clear, a highly determined Ayaka vows to try to invite him, earning an enthusiastic cheer of encouragement from her best friend. With the plan officially set, a highly excited Saki immediately shifts back to gossip mode, eagerly demanding to hear all the juicy details about what went down at the supermarket, leaving a flustered Ayaka to nervously stammer over her words. Walking down the street together, Ayaka quietly admits that despite everything she still does not know very much about Utsuki-kun, leaving her wondering why on earth she ended up falling for him so quickly in the first place. Saki ponders the mystery for a moment before dropping some massive relationship wisdom, suggesting that Ayaka might actually like him precisely because there is still so much mystery left to discover about him, which completely catches Ayaka off guard. Saki explains that her curiosity naturally makes her want to learn more, adding that from now on every single thing she discovers about him will only make her fall even deeper in love. Saki playfully asks if that is not pretty much how love is supposed to work for everyone. The wise words deeply resonate in Ayaka's mind, making her quietly realize that her feelings will only continue to grow stronger as she learns more about him. The profound realization completely settles in leaving Ayaka thoroughly stunned by the exciting possibility of falling even more deeply in love with her classmate. With her heart feeling lighter than ever, she walks forward with a renewed sense of confidence, finally ready to embrace the beautiful journey of love ahead of her. Filled with absolute happiness, Ayaka warmly admits to herself that she never could have guessed that falling in love could actually feel this absolutely wonderful. Meanwhile, over at the Daojima dojo, Haruto is completely focused on his Kyokushin karate, training totally unaware of the romantic storm brewing in his classmate's heart. At the dojo, a senior student notices Haruto looking a bit stiff and asks what is wrong. Haruto casually explains that he ended up cooking 3 massive fish during his housekeeping shift the previous day. The senior student curiously asks if Haruto works at a fish shop for his part-time job, but Haruto clarifies that he actually just works as a regular housekeeper. Out of nowhere, a creepy girl suddenly sneaks up right behind them and bluntly declares that she wants to hire Haruto for life, so he can take care of all her housekeeping for eternity. Haruto nearly jumps out of his skin in absolute shock, prompting the deadpan girl to menacingly chuckle and tell him that failing to sense her presence means he will never reach the true pinnacle of karate. The older student jokes that she has perfected her creepy villain aura so well that it literally radiates from her entire body, prompting the girl to immediately scold him for talking about her as if she is some kind of literal demon lord. Shizuku casually points out that Haruto's shoulders are definitely stiff, which he nervously confirms. She immediately volunteers to give him a massage, boldly hyping herself up by claiming she possesses literal god hands. Shizuku intensely brags about her highly skilled fingertips, confidently warning him that once she finishes massaging him, his body will become completely dependent on her presence. Haruto sweats nervously and mutters that her bold threat is actually incredibly terrifying. Ignoring his obvious fear, Shizuku completely takes charge and firmly tells Haruto to sit down on the floor so she can immediately get to work on fixing his stiff shoulders. As she massages him, Shizuku checks if it feels good, which Haruto happily confirms. She then asks if he has already become entirely dependent on her presence, prompting him to playfully tease her back by sarcastically declaring that he simply cannot live without her anymore, which instantly earns him a heavily annoyed pout from the younger girl. The playful moment is abruptly shattered when someone completely unexpected suddenly reaches out and fiercely grabs hold of Haruto. Shizuku completely catches Haruto off guard with a ruthless tickle attack, making him burst into a helpless fit of laughter as he desperately begs her to stop. Showing absolutely no mercy, Shizuku continues her relentless barrage, while a breathless Haruto frantically calls out to Kazu-senpai for help. Instead of stepping in, Kazu-senpai just casually watches the chaos unfold and dryly notes that the two of them really get along well. Haruto finally catches a much-needed breather after the assault completely wiped out, as Shizuku smugly asks if he has finally learned to fear the overwhelming power of her god hand. Still panting heavily, Haruto confusedly asks what the sudden attack was even for. Shizuku proudly claims it was a justified punishment for him toying with a maiden's pure feelings, a bizarre reasoning that completely baffles him. Kazu-senpai suddenly chimes in to suggest she actually went a bit too hard on him, a sentiment Shizuku easily agrees with. A highly annoyed Haruto immediately shoots back, demanding to know why his senior didn't bother stepping in to stop her, if he thought it was too much. Kazu-senpai quickly clarifies that he wasn't talking about the tickling, but rather Haruto's new housekeeping part-time job, asking if the heavy workload ever gets exhausting. Haruto easily brushes off the concern, assuring his friend that he isn't tired at all, since it was a job he willingly chose to take on. Haruto warmly adds that his employers have been incredibly kind to him, explaining that seeing them so genuinely satisfied with his cleaning and cooking leaves him feeling nothing but deeply grateful. With a sweet memory of Ayaka's bright smile flashing through his mind, Haruto happily concludes that taking the housekeeping gig was absolutely the right decision, quietly considering her presence the absolute best part of it all. Hearing his sincere explanation, Kazu-senpai gives a warm smile and expresses his relief that Haruto has finally found a job he truly enjoys, earning a very enthusiastic confirmation from the young housekeeper. The wholesome moment is suddenly interrupted by Shizuku, who locks a deadpan stare onto Haruto and bluntly asks if she can tickle him just one more time, catching him completely by surprise. Back at the Daojima dojo, a highly annoyed Shizuku suddenly launches an aggressive attack on Haruto, bluntly declaring that his face simply annoyed her to bits, while a furious Haruto begs her to stop messing with him. Sometime later, Haruto is hard at work on his housekeeping job, meticulously scrubbing the bathroom tile until he stands back to proudly admire his spotless work. He quietly runs through his mental checklist, reminding himself to thoroughly rinse down the freshly scrubbed surfaces next. The quiet routine is shattered when Ayaka suddenly walks in, causing both of them to let out startled, high-pitched shrieks as they unexpectedly cross paths in the narrow doorway. Haruto quickly apologizes for not realizing she was there and checks if she needs anything, prompting a deeply flustered Ayaka to hesitantly ask if she could possibly help him out with his cleaning duties for a little while. Struggling to find her words, Ayaka stammers nervously as she tries to come up with a casual way to explain her sudden offer. Ayaka suddenly blabs out a highly random question about whether his blood type is leaving a completely bewildered Haruto thoroughly confused. Desperately trying to save herself from the awkward slip-up, Ayaka quickly explains that she only asked because his cleaning is always so unbelievably spotless and meticulous, prompting a smiling Haruto to realize she was indeed guessing his blood type. Haruto reveals that his blood type is actually O and jokingly warns her that his own bedroom is actually quite messy, which Ayaka quietly nods along to as she processes the new trivia about him. When Haruto politely returns the question, Ayaka reveals that her blood type is B, prompting a surprised Haruto to admit that her answer is actually quite unexpected, given her highly organized and proper personality. Haruto admits that he used to think of her as an untouchable mystery, almost like a flower beyond his reach, prompting a curious and slightly hopeful Ayaka to ask if he still views her that way. Blushing slightly, Haruto confesses that since they have gotten so much closer, his perspective has completely shifted. He admits he now realizes she is actually just a normal, down-to-earth girl, but in the most positive, endearing way possible. Hearing him say she is just a normal girl to him makes Ayaka absolutely ecstatic, and she leans in with pure unbridled excitement to confirm if he is truly serious. Her sudden, intense physical proximity completely startles Haruto, leaving him sweating nervously and panicking internally over the fact that her gorgeous face is way too close to his. Their incredibly tense close-up moment is suddenly interrupted when the door slides open, and her mother Ichi cheerfully walks into the room. Seeing how ridiculously close they are standing, her mother immediately shoots them a knowing, teasing smirk, jokingly offering to leave so she doesn't crash their romantic moment, and prompting a completely mortified Ayaka to loudly protest. Once her mother leaves, a deeply embarrassed Ayaka quickly apologizes for her mom's constant weird teasing. However, Haruto warmly brushes it off, genuinely admitting that he actually envies her for having such a cheerful, fun mother. Haruto explains that simply having her mother's lively presence around makes him feel deeply grateful for having a warm mother figure in his life, prompting Ayaka to watch him with a look of quiet, tender sympathy. Wanting to lighten the mood, Haruto casually adds that whenever her mother's teasing makes her flustered, her embarrassed reactions are actually totally adorable, sending a completely caught-off-guard Ayaka into a state of absolute short-circuiting shock. The incredibly direct and sudden compliment leaves Ayaka completely breathless, completely unable to form a coherent sentence, as her heart races once again. Ayaka mutters about how annoying it is for him to casually call her adorable when she is embarrassed, calling him a total menace, which prompts a highly nervous Haruto to quickly stammer out a flustered apology. Haruto happily changes the subject back to their upcoming zoo trip, prompting Ayaka to realize this is the exact moment she has been waiting for to execute Saki's plan. Ayaka tentatively asks if he happens to be free tomorrow, completely catching Haruto off guard with the sudden question. She freezes up for a brief second as she struggles to find the courage to ask. Ayaka quickly suggests meeting up elsewhere to discuss the zoo schedule, claiming it would be bad if her mother overheard their conversation at the house, which Haruto readily accepts. Taking a massive leap of faith, she nervously asks if they can watch a movie together while they plan. She quickly uses Saki's cinema tickets as her cover story, explaining that a friend just happened to give her some discounted movie passes. She nervously checks in to see how he feels about her highly unexpected invitation. Seeing his completely surprised reaction, a highly panicked Ayaka immediately tries to backtrack, frantically telling him that it is totally fine if he decides to pass on the offer. She awkwardly explains that while she knows it might seem a bit strange to plan their trip at a theater, she simply didn't want the rare discounted passes to go to waste, leaving a completely flustered Haruto struggling to figure out how to put his response into words. Haruto reassures Ayaka that she does not need to worry because he actually wants to go to the cinema too, which makes her check if he is really being serious, earning a warm and genuine confirmation from him. Overjoyed by his positive response, Ayaka beams with absolute happiness, her eyes completely sparkling at the wonderful realization that their movie plan is officially a go. Haruto awkwardly brings up the next crucial step of choosing a movie to watch, prompting Ayaka to reveal that she has already picked out a title she is incredibly curious about. She shows him a popular romance movie called Summer Sky and Love, completely catching Haruto off guard, as he secretly assumed a girl like Taoju-san had absolutely no interest in romantic genres. Haruto cheerfully agrees that the movie has been highly popular lately, and casually suggests they should watch it together, just the two of them, which leaves a surprised Ayaka processing his incredibly bold suggestion. She checks in to confirm if he is truly okay with her movie choice, and Haruto happily agrees, telling her that he is really looking forward to their outing tomorrow. Beaming with a warm, blushing smile, Ayaka happily confirms her excitement, eagerly sharing that she is looking forward to tomorrow just as much as he is. Trying to keep the momentum going, Ayaka nervously holds up her phone and suggests they finally exchange contact information, her cheeks flushing as she waits for his reply. Haruto readily agrees that it is a great idea, and as they stand together in the entryway, he happily pulls out his own phone to scan her contact code. They successfully complete the exchange, and Ayaka immediately kicks things off by sending over an adorable rabbit sticker wishing him a nice to meet you, which Haruto quickly responds to in kind. Haruto smiles warmly at his phone screen after receiving an incredibly adorable rabbit sticker from Taoju-san officially saying nice to meet you. Realizing they can easily just hash out their zoo plans over text now, Haruto warmly notes to himself that Taoju-san really can be quite a clumsy girl sometimes. His heart swells with eager anticipation for their upcoming trip, though he secretly wonders if this massive excitement is actually stemming from something far deeper than just a simple zoo visit. Stepping completely out of his usual housekeeper routine, Haruto carefully fixes his hair in front of the bathroom mirror as he prepares to head out for the day. His grandmother suddenly spots him by the doorway, casually asking if he has plans to go out somewhere special today. Haruto confirms that he is heading out to catch a movie, prompting his grandmother to naturally assume he is hanging out with his usual friend Tomoya, but a heavily blushing Haruto shyly corrects her and admits he is actually going with someone from his class. His grandmother instantly picks up on his nervous energy and playfully asks if this mysterious classmate happens to be a girl, and when he shakily stammers out a yes, she excitedly declares that he is officially going on a date, leaving a completely shocked Haruto freezing in pure panic at the heavy label. Standing in his kitchen, a highly flustered Haruto frantically waves his hands and desperately tries to convince his grandmother that his upcoming outing with Ayaka is absolutely not a date, only for her to cut him off with a very stern knowing call of his name. His grandmother bluntly drops some serious logic on him, firmly stating that going out to meet a woman one-on-one is the literal definition of a date. She lectures her grandson that even if Ayaka doesn't see it as a romantic date, he must treat it like one, and escort her with absolute gentlemanly manners, prompting a thoughtful Haruto to quietly reflect on her wise advice. Haruto nods in respectful agreement, confirming that he completely understands her advice. Confidently heading out, Haruto promises to behave perfectly and officially announces his departure for his first date, earning a warm smile and a cheerful wishing of good luck from his grandmother. Repeating his grandmother's words about gentlemanly conduct, Haruto does a quick check in the hallway mirror to make sure he looks completely presentable before officially stepping out. Haruto arrives at the incredibly busy Kitamachi station, surrounded by bustling crowds of people going about their weekend. Waiting outside the station, Haruto reflects that while his grandmother's dating logic might be slightly old-fashioned, and Ayaka likely doesn't view their outing as a date either, it is only natural for a guy to properly escort his classmate, though he still can't help but feel a tiny bit nervous about how things will go. Standing in place, he quietly reassures himself that he has done his homework, having already researched several nice local cafes they can visit together after the movie wraps up. Wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead under the blazing sun, Haruto grumbles about how unbelievably hot it has already gotten even though it isn't even noon yet. Haruto arrives at the plaza a full 20 minutes early for their highly anticipated movie date, quietly killing time as he waits for Ayaka to show up. scrolling through their excited text exchange from the night before he chuckles to himself, while figuring that there is absolutely no way she would have arrived this early right, before a sudden commotion catches his attention. A growing murmur ripples through the busy plaza, as Haruto notices a massive crowd suddenly forming nearby, clearly captivated by something out of the ordinary. Eavesdropping on the excited whispers, he hears the surrounding crowd wildly speculating if a famous idol or professional model has suddenly appeared for a photo shoot, given how incredibly stunning the mystery girl looks. Politely pushing his way to the front of the gathered crowd to satisfy his curiosity, Haruto completely freezes up in awe as a heavy blush instantly paints his face. The mystery idol causing the massive public commotion turns out to be none other than Ayaka herself, looking absolutely breathtaking in her beautiful weekend outfit as she nervously waits for him. Staring at her from the edge of the crowd, a slightly overwhelmed Haruto fully realizes that while he always knew she was incredibly cute, seeing her command this level of intense public attention is completely on another level. Watching her nervously fidget under the heavy public gaze, he internally praises her overwhelming natural charm, feeling incredibly lucky to be the one she is actually waiting for. His quiet admiration is suddenly cut short when a random guy boldly steps up to try and hit on her, immediately snapping Haruto out of his daze. Refusing to let the stranger bother her, Haruto quickly jumps into action and cheerfully calls out her name, instantly filling a highly relieved Ayaka with joy as her savior finally arrives. Spotting him at their designated meeting place, Ayaka eagerly calls out Haruto's name with a radiant, heart-melting smile. Hearing her call, Haruto looks back only for his heart to completely skip a beat at how breathtakingly beautiful she looks in her casual outfit. Haruto sheepishly apologizes in case he kept her waiting, but Ayaka quickly reassures him that she just arrived herself as they set off down the busy street together on their exciting movie outing. Ayaka breaks the quiet silence by cheerfully noting that she is really looking forward to the movie they are going to see today. Haruto agrees and admits he has been looking forward to it as well, but as he sneaks a quiet glance at her, a sudden nervous silence falls over him. He struggles to find his voice, wanting to say something but hesitating on the brink of speaking. Stealing his nerves, Haruto nervously stammers out that she looks incredibly lovely today, completely catching Ayaka off guard and causing her to blush furiously in happy surprise. He explains that her style today has a wonderfully mature, grown-up feel, but still retains an incredibly cute charm, sending her head into a complete tailspin. Haruto sheepishly adds that he thinks she is truly attractive, immediately kicking himself internally for stumbling over his words like a complete dork. Completely overwhelmed by his direct compliments, Ayaka can only look down in extreme embarrassment as she stammers out a quiet, shy thank you. Haruto immediately panics and turns away, frantically overthinking whether he just made a fool of himself or sounded completely creepy. As they walk side by side, Haruto desperately searches for a way to recover from the awkward moment just as Ayaka tentatively breaks the silence. Ayaka sweetly compliments him, noting that while he always looks cool today, he seems surprisingly more mature than usual, which catches a deeply blushing Haruto completely by surprise. A highly flustered Haruto shyly offers his gratitude, which Ayaka softly acknowledges with a nervous, happy smile of her own. As they continue on in a loaded, comfortable silence, Haruto is suddenly pulled back to reality by the bustling cinema entrance. Arriving at the theater, they both enthusiastically agree that the movie is going to be incredibly fun. Stepping inside the lobby for their highly anticipated outing, they immediately head over to join the crowd looking for movie treats. Haruto asks if she usually gets popcorn at the theater, and when Ayaka mentions that she typically eats it, Haruto confidently decides to take the lead and suggests they do the exact same thing. Haruto tells her to wait there and browse the shop while he heads off to buy the snacks, earning a gentle and appreciative agreement from Ayaka. He looks at the incredibly long, crowded queue at the concession stand and silently sighs, realizing that getting their snacks is going to take a very long time. Walking alongside Ayaka, Haruto quietly reflects on how exhausting it must be for her to constantly get stared at whenever she goes out in public, noting with a heavy sigh that even though she claims she is used to it still seems completely overwhelming. The situation quickly proves Haruto's point when a group of flashy guys suddenly approaches Ayaka out of nowhere, smoothly apologizing for the sudden interruption, before boldly claiming that they just had to say something because she is incredibly cute, leaving a highly uncomfortable Ayaka nervously trying to figure out how to respond. The persistent guys completely ignore her discomfort and keep pushing smoothly, insisting that she come talk with them for a little bit, while mentioning that they know a great place right nearby. As the overly confident guy leans in and tries to claim that them bumping into each other must be some sort of romantic fate, a firm voice suddenly cuts right through the conversation with a sharp "excuse me." Haruto immediately steps right into the middle of the group to protect Ayaka, directly asking the guys if there is something specific they actually need from her. The guys are completely caught off guard by his sudden appearance, instantly assuming Haruto is her boyfriend, and quickly apologizing for interrupting their date, while an incredibly relieved Ayaka brightly calls out Haruto's name. Haruto silently kicks himself for carelessly leaving her alone for even a moment, but before Ayaka can finish assuring them that it is completely fine, one of the guys suddenly gets a bright idea and boldly invites both of them to just hang out with their group so all 5 of them can spend time together. Haruto stares back at the persistent guys in absolute silence, his eyes instantly hardening into a fierce, unwavering glare that clearly shows he is completely out of patience with their relentless flirting. Without missing a single beat, Haruto firmly rejects the invitation, flatly stating that they cannot hang out because they actually have a movie to catch. Instead of taking the very obvious hint, the incredibly persistent guy just praises their movie date idea and shamelessly asks if his group can come watch it with them, forcing a highly annoyed Haruto to repeat his refusal, while mentally complaining about just how ridiculously stubborn these guys are being. The pierced guy presses Haruto for answers, skeptically demanding to know if he is actually Ayaka's boyfriend, or if they are strictly just hanging out as friends. Caught completely off guard by the direct and invasive question, a highly flustered Haruto nervously stammers as he desperately tries to figure out how to explain their relationship. Before Haruto can even form a proper sentence, a heavily blushing Ayaka completely takes charge and loudly declares that he is indeed her boyfriend, leaving the young housekeeper utterly paralyzed in absolute shock. Catching onto her bold lie, Haruto frantically backs her up by stammering that they are currently out on a romantic date together, while Ayaka nervously begs the group of guys to finally leave them alone. Gathering his courage, Haruto firmly steps up and tells the persistent strangers to respect what Ayaka just said and stop interrupting their date. Completely ignoring Haruto's firm warning, the pierced guy just laughs the rejection off and boldly insists on making it up to them by treating Ayaka to something. The sudden and aggressive approach sends a massive wave of panic through Ayaka, leaving her completely frozen in pure terror as the stranger casually reaches out for her. Refusing to let the stranger lay a finger on her, Haruto immediately steps directly in front of Ayaka and tightly intercepts the guy's arm, fiercely warning him that he is being a massive nuisance. Seeing Haruto fearlessly step up to protect her makes Ayaka's heart completely skip a beat, leaving her staring up at her fake boyfriend in absolute blushing awe. The fierce intervention completely startles the pierced guy, immediately prompting his much more sensible friends to quickly apologize for the trouble and aggressively drag him away, so the 2 teenagers can finally enjoy their date in peace. Haruto lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh of relief as the tension of the sudden confrontation finally fades away. Haruto checks to make sure Ayaka is okay after dealing with such an incredibly pushy guy. A heavily blushing Ayaka admits the encounter was definitely a little scary, but softly adds that she is just incredibly glad Atsuki-kun came back right in time to save her. Without a single warning, a highly panicked Haruto suddenly bows deeply and loudly shouts out a massive apology for the entire situation. A highly remorseful Haruto explains that he absolutely should have realized someone like Taoju-san would instantly get hit on if left totally alone. He then nervously brings up his fake boyfriend excuse, awkwardly checking if claiming to be her partner made her feel uncomfortable, while a flustered Ayaka frantically insists that none of this was his fault. Ayaka quickly shuts down the idea of being uncomfortable, shyly stammering out that if anything, having him act as her boyfriend actually made her incredibly happy. Haruto is left completely wide-eyed and blushing as Ayaka flashes him an absolutely beaming, heartfelt smile, softly reiterating how genuinely happy she really was. With her feelings firmly confirmed, a highly flustered Haruto shyly offers that if she is okay with it being him, she can feel absolutely free to use him to ward off annoying guys in the future. Haruto warmly promises that she can always just say the word if there is ever anything else she wants him to do, which a deeply moved Ayaka quietly and sincerely thanks him for. Ayaka heavily blushes and nervously starts to ask for something else, but her courage completely fails her at the last second, and she quickly backtracks, leaving a highly confused Haruto wondering what she was about to say. Flashing an incredibly gentle and reassuring smile, Haruto warmly encourages her not to hold back at all. Emboldened by his sweet words of furiously blushing, Ayaka finally gathers her courage and tentatively prepares to ask him for what she truly wants. Ayaka's face flushes a bright red as she stammers out a shocked repetition of his suggestion, completely overwhelmed by the idea of actually holding hands with him. Standing in the middle of the crowded movie theater lobby, Haruto's brain completely short-circuits as he goes totally blank, the massive weight of his incredibly bold proposal finally crashing down on him. Reality hits Haruto like a freight train, and his face instantly erupts into a furious deep blush as he realizes exactly what he just asked her to do. Desperately trying to justify the idea, a highly nervous Ayaka shyly explains that holding hands would definitely make them look like a convincing couple to anyone watching, hastily adding that he should only do it if he is comfortable. Haruto frantically agrees, covering his blushing face as he stammers out a nervous confirmation. Gathering every last ounce of his courage, Haruto tentatively extends his hand toward her, gently offering that they should go ahead and hold hands if she is truly okay with it. Ayaka softly stammers out an agreement as she reaches out, her heart racing, as she quietly convinces herself that she is entirely willing to take this massive step as long as it is with Atsuki-kun. The tension in the theater lobby skyrockets to absolute maximum as the two blushing teenagers stand completely frozen, far too embarrassed to even look each other in the eye. Slowly closing the agonizing gap between them, their hands hesitantly inch closer and closer, with their trembling fingers just moments away from making contact. The romantic atmosphere becomes overwhelmingly thick as they stand side by side in front of the movie posters, both vibrating with nervous energy as they prepare to officially hold hands. The moment of truth finally arrives as their trembling fingers gently brush against one another, officially crossing the boundary as they slowly go in for the handhold. Taking a massive leap of courage, Haruto gently reaches out and grabs hold of Ayaka's hand. Their fingers tightly interlock as they firmly clench their hands together to secure their warm grasp. Standing side by side, the two of them briefly freeze in place, completely overwhelmed by the intense heart-racing feeling of officially holding hands. Both of them frantically try to look straight ahead, their faces absolutely burning with bright red blushes as they awkwardly process the massive romantic step they just took. A highly flustered Haruto tries to break the tension by nervously asking if they should go buy some popcorn, but Ayaka softly turns down the offer, boldly confessing that she simply does not want to let go of his hand just yet. Blushing even harder at her incredibly sweet admission, Haruto quietly accepts her answer as they continue walking forward, the romantic distance between them shrinking closer than ever before. Still clutching her hand tightly, Haruto guides them right up to the cinema doors and announces that they have finally arrived at their screening room. Still completely flustered by their rapidly escalating romantic tension, the heavily blushing pair bravely steps through the doors together to finally enjoy their highly anticipated movie date. Haruto can hardly focus on anything else as he marvels at the physical contact, his mind completely overwhelmed by how incredibly soft and delicate her hands feel against his own. Desperately trying to keep his cool, Haruto frantically reminds himself that they are merely pretending to be a couple just to ward off unwanted attention from other guys, nervously checking with Ayaka to confirm their fake dating scheme. They finally make their way into the dimly lit screening room, with Haruto gently guiding them down the aisle as he spots their assigned seats in the theater. As they reach their row, a highly flustered Haruto awkwardly suggests they go ahead and take their seats, while Ayaka remains completely silent with a deep blush on her face. Before Haruto can even properly process his next move, Ayaka suddenly clenches his hand tightly, catching him completely off guard and sending another massive wave of nervous energy through him. Feeling her grip firmly lock around his fingers, Haruto's brain goes into absolute overdrive as he frantically tries to figure out exactly what her sudden intense squeeze is supposed to mean. The two of them settle into their cinema seats side by side, both completely frozen stiff and blushing furiously as the intense awkwardness of their situation fully sets in. Sitting together in the packed theater, the overwhelming reality of their date leaves both of them highly flustered, their linked hands serving as a constant nerve-wracking reminder of their rapidly escalating dynamic. The theater lights suddenly click off, plunging the room into darkness, and prompting a highly panicked Haruto to finally break the silence, desperately trying to ask Ayaka what exactly she is doing. Completely dodging his flustered question, Ayaka simply points out that the pre-movie ads have started rolling, leaving a heavily sweating Haruto to awkwardly agree that the feature presentation will be starting very soon. As they sit together in the dark, a highly nervous Haruto quietly reflects on how incredibly wild it is that their entire escalating relationship all started simply because he took a part-time gig as her housekeeper. Sitting right beside him, a deeply blushing, Ayaka tries her absolute best to keep her composure, completely overwhelmed by the intense heart-pounding reality of sitting so intimately close to her crush. The bustling theater completely quiets down as the production studio's logo finally flashes across the massive screen, officially signaling the start of their highly anticipated feature presentation. Despite the film officially kicking off, the two hopelessly flustered teenagers remain entirely distracted by the massive romantic tension between them, making it painstakingly obvious that neither of them is actually paying any real attention to the movie. The blockbuster romance film dives straight into its opening act with a dramatic declaration of summer love, completely oblivious to the fact that its two most invested viewers are currently entirely preoccupied with their very own real-life romance blooming in the audience. As the romance film plays out in front of them, neither Haruto nor Ayaka can actually pay a single shred of attention to the plot. They simply sit in the dark, blushing furiously side by side, as they remain completely overwhelmed by the intense reality of their highly intimate movie date. The movie on the big screen suddenly hits a massive emotional climax, featuring a highly romantic scene where the male lead boldly confesses that he has liked the heroine for a very long time before slowly leaning in for a passionate kiss. Completely swept up by the incredibly romantic atmosphere radiating from the movie screen, Ayaka suddenly acts on her swirling emotions and tightly squeezes Haruto's hand in the dark. The sudden firm squeeze completely short-circuits Haruto's brain, leaving him jolting in his seat with wide eyes and a furiously blushing face as he frantically tries to process her incredibly bold move. Trying desperately to play it cool after making such a massive leap, Ayaka keeps her eyes glued straight ahead at the movie screen, though her deeply flushed face completely betrays just how incredibly flustered she actually is by their rapidly escalating romantic tension. Haruto grips the armrest in sheer nervousness, his heart pounding furiously as he tries to stay calm in the dark theater. The overwhelming physical proximity of his classmate leaves him completely flustered, making him sweat heavily as he desperately tries to maintain his composure. Sitting side by side in their seats, Haruto tries his best to focus on the movie screen, but he is completely distracted by their close contact. He sneaks a nervous glance at Ayaka, completely overwhelmed by the quiet silence as his mind races with embarrassment. Suddenly, a jolt of pure electricity runs through the dark as Ayaka tentatively reaches over and grips his hand on the armrest. The sudden touch completely catches Haruto off guard, sending his heart rate straight through the roof as their fingers interlock. Finding themselves holding hands once again, a completely mortified Ayaka buries her blushing face, unable to handle the sheer intensity of her own boldness. Haruto looks over at her in quiet awe, his cheeks flushing bright red as he realizes she is just as flustered as he is. Ayaka lets out a quiet, embarrassed groan as she tries to hide her burning face, completely overwhelmed by how fast her heart is racing. The heavy romantic tension leaves both of them totally incapable of focusing on the movie, trapped in a sweet heart-pounding world of their own. Ayaka sits in her theater seat, resting her cheek in her hand and trying her absolute best to concentrate on the screen. Haruto sits right next to her, similarly trying to focus on the movie, but the intense romantic tension in the dark theater makes it impossible for either of them to pay attention. As the movie plays on, the sheer embarrassment of holding hands earlier has Ayaka completely hiding her red face with her hands, totally defeated by her own racing heart. She feels completely helpless, realizing she cannot bring herself to look at Haruto or even follow the plot. Gathering her courage in the dark, a deeply blushing Ayaka suddenly turns her head to look directly at Haruto with a serious, intense expression. The unexpected direct gaze completely startles a highly flustered Haruto, sending another massive wave of shock through him. The two find themselves locked in an agonizingly long-loaded silence as they stare directly into each other's eyes in the dark theater. Neither of them can say a single word, the overwhelming romantic tension completely paralyzing their thoughts. Slowly sliding her hand over, Ayaka gently places her fingers on top of Haruto's hand, once again on the armrest, silently confirming her desire to hold hands throughout the movie. Looking down at their linked fingers, Haruto is left completely dazed, his heart swelling at her incredibly sweet initiative. During the movie, their hands unexpectedly find each other on the D armrest, leading to a sudden heart-racing handhold. Sitting next to each other in the dark theater, both of them are completely frozen and blushing furiously, utterly overwhelmed by the sudden physical contact. Taoju-san nervously turns her head away to hide her burning cheeks, while Haruto sits in complete wide-eyed shock, unable to believe they are actually holding hands. Surrounded by a quiet theater of faceless strangers, the two of them try their best to focus on the screen, though their racing hearts make it absolutely impossible to pay attention to the movie. Once the movie finally ends, they join the crowd exiting the theater, and heading into the hallway, both of them still deeply dazed and silent after such an intense experience. Wanting to talk things over and unwind, they head to a quiet modern cafe with a beautiful view of the city to decompress after the intense movie date. Sitting across from each other at the table, a highly flustered Haruto stares down nervously at his drink, while Taoju-san tries her best to maintain her composure. Breaking the tense silence, Taoju-san hesitantly asks Haruto how he liked the movie and if he genuinely enjoyed their outing, catching him slightly off guard. Blushing deeply, Haruto sincerely confesses that it is a movie he will probably remember for the rest of his entire life. When Haruto turns the question back to her, Taoju-san enthusiastically agrees that it was absolutely great, before quietly admitting that she actually stopped following the story partway through because of how distracted she was. Ayaka sweetly admits to Haruto that she thinks she will never forget this movie either, her cheeks flushing deeply as she shyly holds her drink. Completely moved by her sincere words, a heavily blushing Haruto tightly grips his leg and nervously stammers out that he feels the exact same way. The incredibly romantic tension leaves both of them completely flustered, prompting the two teenagers to awkwardly sip their drinks at the exact same time in a heavy, comfortable silence. Desperate to finally break the tension, Haruto smoothly pivots the conversation to their upcoming zoo trip, casually suggesting they visit Dobutsu no Mori Park, which immediately sparks an excited realization from Ayaka that they still need to plan the actual details. Haruto explains that while the park differs slightly from a regular zoo, it features a fantastic petting area, a playground, and a water play zone that will definitely keep little Ryuta fully entertained, earning a highly enthusiastic approval from a smiling Ayaka. Ayaka happily adds to the itinerary by suggesting they bring packed lunches to eat together out on the grass, a charming idea that Haruto fully supports, since he was actually thinking the exact same thing. With their ideas perfectly aligned, Haruto officially declares Dobutsu no Mori Park as their set destination, earning a cheerful confirmation from his classmate. Moving on to the schedule, they quickly agree that next Wednesday works perfectly for both of them, prompting Haruto to confidently volunteer to make the packed lunches and pick her up directly from her house. Ayaka immediately panics and protests the generous offer, frantically insisting that she cannot possibly let him make all the lunches, since Wednesday is not even one of his scheduled housekeeping working days. Haruto flashes a warm smile and smoothly reassures her that it is completely fine since he genuinely loves cooking, prompting a hesitant Ayaka to stammer out a quiet objection before a sudden burst of exciting inspiration hits her. Ayaka brightly suggests that they could make their morning lunches together to prepare for the trip, excitedly hoping he agrees to the fun idea. Haruto enthusiastically agrees that making lunch together sounds like a fantastic plan, sending Ayaka into a joyful little celebration over their new arrangement. The two classmates spend the rest of their afternoon relaxing at a cozy cafe, happily chatting away over drinks, as they officially finalize their zoo date schedule. After successfully wrapping up their planning session, they step out of the cafe together, as Haruto gently suggests that it might be time for them to finally start heading home. Before they can even set off down the street, Haruto nervously stammers to get her attention, instantly causing Ayaka to freeze up with a quiet, heavy blush. Mustering up every single ounce of his courage, Haruto smoothly offers his hand and boldly asks if she wants to hold hands for the walk back, catching his classmate completely off guard. Feeling incredibly self-conscious about his bold move, a highly flustered Haruto awkwardly tries to justify the romantic gesture by claiming it will easily prevent her from getting hit on again, quickly scrambling to add that they only have to do it if she is totally comfortable. A beaming Ayaka eagerly accepts his sweet excuse, without a single second thought, loudly declaring that she is absolutely okay with it, as she happily closes the gap between them. Their fingers tightly intertwine once again, as a deeply blushing Haruto formally promises to safely walk her all the way home, earning a wonderfully sweet and enthusiastic confirmation from his overjoyed classmate. As their movie outing officially wraps up, the two bid each other a fond farewell, as they promise to see each other again soon. Walking home alone through the quiet neighborhood streets, Haruto silently reflects on the incredibly eventful day they just did together. He pauses his walk to stare down thoughtfully at his own palm, completely hung up on a very specific lingering sensation from their time together. The vivid memory of their hands tightly clasped together replays in his mind, causing a light blush to form, as he gently clenches his fist to preserve the fading warmth of her delicate touch. Recalling the shocking moment, she boldly declared him as her boyfriend to shake off those persistent guys. Haruto tries to gauge her true feelings, secretly admitting to himself that it would be absolutely amazing if they actually were a real couple. He tries to quickly ground his soaring expectations by reminding himself that she can be a bit spacey, sometimes making him wonder if all her sweetness was simply just basic friendly goodwill. However, his logical reasoning is instantly shattered by the fresh memory of them sitting closely in the dark cinema, where she shyly confessed that she held on to him because she simply did not want to let go of his hand. A heavily flustered Haruto furiously questions why she would do something so unbelievably bold, properly reasoning that if she was just keeping up their fake couple act for the random strangers outside, there was absolutely zero reason to keep holding his hand through the entire film. The overwhelming evidence finally pushes him to wildly speculate if she might actually have a genuine crush on him, leaving his mind frantically racing as he struggles to process the incredibly exciting possibility. Walking down the street after his date, Haruto is suddenly startled when his phone begins to vibrate intensely in his pocket, prompting him to pull it out to see who is calling. Staring down at his screen as the device continues to buzz, he curiously checks the caller ID to find out who is trying to reach him. Haruto sighs in mild disappointment upon realizing it is just his friend Tomoya on the line, prompting a playful Tomoya to tease him for being so cold and claim that Haruto is secretly thrilled to hear from him. As Haruto walks home, he casually asks his friend what is going on, leading Tomoya to admit that he actually has some major news to with him. Tomoya excitedly boasts that his family is having a highly luxurious A5-grade beef sukiyaki dinner at his house tonight. After Tomoya explains that his mother won the premium beef as a department store prize, Haruto playfully tells his friend not to be so jealous of his good fortune, assuming Tomoya simply spent his entire weekend studying reference books as usual. Haruto suddenly goes quiet and hesitates, his face turning slightly pink, as he wonders if he should what actually happened on his weekend. When Haruto casually reveals that he actually went to see a movie with Tojo-san today, a completely flabbergasted Tomoya loses his mind on the other end of the line, screaming in absolute shock over his friend going on a date with the school idol. Tomoya instantly demands to know if Haruto confessed his love to her right after the movie, sending a highly flustered Haruto into a defensive panic, as he questions why on earth a simple movie outing would automatically lead to a confession. Tomoya passionately yells that not confessing is a complete waste of a perfect opportunity, before curiously pressing Haruto to explain whether he was actually the one who gathered the courage to invite Tojo-san out in the first place. Haruto clarifies to his friend that the upcoming movie date wasn't actually his doing, explaining that it was entirely Tojo-san's idea to go. As he walks down the street, his friend points out the very real possibility that Tojo-san might actually have romantic feelings for him. Haruto immediately brushes off the suggestion, firmly believing there is absolutely no way a school idol like her could ever be interested in him. When his friend argues that it would be incredibly rude not to confess after being invited to a movie, Haruto realizes he is just being teased and pushed to make a move. Despite his friend eagerly demanding to hear all about any future romantic updates, Haruto fiercely shuts him down and refuses to a single detail. Hanging up the call, Haruto sighs as he tries to convince himself that there is simply no way Tojo-san could actually like him. A sudden refreshing breeze washes over him, leaving Haruto with a soft, happy smile as thoughts of his beautiful classmate fill his mind. He lets out a deep, nervous breath, still completely flustered and overwhelmed by the sheer excitement of everything that happened today. Continuing his walk home, he quietly admits to himself that Taoju-san is almost certainly going to show up in his dreams tonight. Later that night, after their incredibly eventful date, the story transitions to the quiet hours of the evening. Relaxing in her room later that evening, Ayaka taps away on her phone, happily typing out a message to her best friend Saki to announce that she successfully went to the movies with Atsuki-kun today. Lying comfortably on her bed in her pajamas, she cannot help but let out a giddy giggle, completely overjoyed with how wonderfully the entire outing went. Her phone instantly rings with an incoming call from Saki, who immediately shouts her loud congratulations. The second Ayaka picks up and eagerly demands all the juicy details about the date. Ayaka shyly admits that she thinks the date was a massive success and confesses that they even held hands, prompting an excited Saki to cheer that she finally took a step beyond just being regular friends. The casual celebration is suddenly shattered when Saki lets out a massive ear-piercing shout of pure disbelief, leaving a quiet Ayaka sitting on her bed as she processes her friend's extreme reaction. Saki frantically tells her to hold on, completely mind-blown that they held hands the entire trip there, and during the whole movie, without even officially confessing to each other, which instantly makes a panicked Ayaka worry if going that far on a first date was a terrible idea. Saki quickly clarifies that it isn't exactly a bad thing, but bluntly points out that their sense of romantic distance is completely broken, leaving a sweating Ayaka to nervously repeat the heavy realization. Clinging to her phone, a highly anxious Ayaka stammers out her friend's name and desperately asks if she completely messed everything up, feeling totally lost on what to do next. Trying to salvage the situation, Saki suggests that if it was just a simple handhold, they might still be able to play it off as just being really close friends, while Ayaka listens in tense silence. Ayaka nervously shatters that hope by confessing she copied a romantic move from a manga and fully interlocked their fingers the entire time, prompting a completely stunned Saki to flatly admit that she really went all out. Curling up in pure panic, Ayaka desperately wonders if she went way too far by instantly interlocking their fingers on their first date. Saki immediately flips the script over the phone, excitedly declaring that her bold move actually presents the perfect romantic opportunity, leaving a highly confused Ayaka questioning how that could possibly be a good thing. Saki confidently explains that after such an intense and physically close date, Atsuki-kun's entire perspective on her must have completely changed. Saki points out that since Ayaka boldly invited him to the movies and successfully initiated holding hands, he is absolutely guaranteed to be wondering if she has real feelings for him. A deeply blushing Ayaka tentatively asks if her friend really thinks so, prompting Saki to assure her that Haruto is definitely racking his brain trying to figure out if she actually likes him. Just as Ayaka begins to process the optimistic breakdown, Saki suddenly drops a massive curveball by instructing her to completely pull back for a while, prompting a highly bewildered reaction from her thoroughly confused friend. Ayaka instantly panics and demands to know why she should pull away right after they finally got closer. But Saki calmly tells her to relax and explains the master plan. She reveals that suddenly creating distance will make Haruto second-guess everything and wonder if he just imagined the romance, guaranteeing that he will obsessively think about her over and over again. The absolute genius of the plan finally clicks in Ayaka's head, and her face flushes a deep red as she softly repeats the idea of Atsuki-kun constantly keeping her in his thoughts. Saki enthusiastically confirms the strategy, boldly declaring that his mind will eventually become entirely consumed by her. The mere thought of Haruto thinking about her non-stop is completely too much for Ayaka to handle, causing her brain to literally short-circuit in a massive explosion of pure blushing joy. With Ayaka still reeling from the romantic overload, Saki officially summarizes the ultimate dating strategy, instructing her friend to actively keep showing Haruto that she is interested, while strategically pulling back just enough to keep him completely hooked. Saki checks to make sure her best friend understands the assignment, earning a highly determined confirmation from Ayaka, who pumps her fist and bravely vows to do her absolute best to execute the plan and keep him constantly guessing. Saki silently notes to herself that given how completely head over heels Ayaka currently is, her version of pulling back will probably just look like pushing even harder, though she casually figures that might actually work out fine too. She warmly reminds Ayaka that she can always come to her for more advice, earning a very sincere and grateful thank you from her newly confident friend. After wrapping up her phone call, Ayaka bids her friend a warm good night before setting her phone down on its stand, lying back on her bed with a deep sigh, as she realizes how incredibly difficult navigating the rules of romance actually is. Staring quietly at her own palm, she blushes intensely, as she recalls the incredible sensation of holding Haruto's hand, remembering how big and warm his grip felt. She squeezes her eyes shut, utterly overwhelmed by the warm, tingling feelings still lingering from their theater date. Meanwhile, over in his own bedroom, as the night grows late, a highly distracted Haruto sits at his desk, completely unable to focus on his work, secretly wishing he can see Ayaka in his dreams. On the exact same night, the two of them lie awake thinking deeply about one another, their hearts completely aligned, as they bask in the sweet memory of their movie date.